Hello, everyone. I'm excited to share a true scary bedtime story with you today. This story might help you drift off to sleep. But before we begin, make sure to snuggle up in your blankets and close your eyes. I know some of you are listening to this story to help you fall asleep. So before we begin, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. As you relax, I wonder where you're listening from. Maybe a cozy bedroom or perhaps a comfy living room. Either way, get ready for an adventure that might just tickle your imagination. Before we begin, take a deep breath and settle into the comfort of your bed. Feel the soft support of the earth beneath you, steady and strong, just as these stories have stood the test of time. As I count down from 10 to 1, let go of any lingering tension in your body and allow the peaceful energy of this moment to wash over you. 10. Let your shoulders soften. 9. Feel the comfort of your bed beneath you, as if cradling you in warmth. 8. Know that you are safe, and tonight's story will carry you gently into sleep. 7. Close your eyes and feel the rhythm of your breath, steady and calm. 6. Imagine the sounds of nature all around. A soft breeze, the rustling of leaves. 5. Feel your body relax more deeply, surrendering to the peaceful night. 4. You are drifting now, letting go of any remaining thoughts. 3. Each breath takes you deeper into relaxation. 2. You are fully at peace, ready to dream. 1. Now, let the story carry you away into a world where anything is possible. So, as you relax, know that you are part of a tradition that spans generations, where stories like this one have lulled countless others to sleep. Let this be your moment of peace, your escape from the rush of the world. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let the adventure unfold as you drift further into restful sleep. And now, we begin. Once, in a quiet part of the world where the trees touched the sky and the stars twinkled like diamonds, there was a small cabin made of wood and stone. It was tucked away in the heart of a thick forest, far from busy cities and noisy roads. The only sounds came from the rustling leaves, the chirping birds, and the whispers of nature. This cabin was known to many, but very few people dared to stay there. Why? Because of the strange things that happened in those woods. One chilly afternoon, a man decided he wanted to escape from the world for a while. He wanted peace, quiet, and solitude. He found the cabin online and thought it would be perfect for his week-long retreat. Ignoring the warnings he read in the reviews about shadowy figures and unsettling noises, he packed his bag, eager for adventure. He envisioned days filled with exploring nature, reading by the crackling fire, and letting his thoughts wander. But he had no idea what was waiting for him in that forest. When he arrived at the cabin, it was just as charming as the picture showed. Wildflowers danced in the gentle breeze, and sunlight flickered through the branches like playful children. It was a beautiful sight. But the moment he stepped onto the porch, he felt a shiver crawl down his spine. The air felt thick, heavy with secrets. The man shook off the strange feeling and set about making the cabin his home for the week. He lit a fire in the fireplace, cooked himself a simple dinner, and settled into a large, comfy chair with a book. As the sun dipped below the horizon, shadows carved into the forest seemed to stretch closer, as if the trees were watching him. That night, as he lay in bed, a rustling noise outside pulled him from his sleep. It began softly, like leaves skimming over one another, but it grew louder. Suddenly, he heard something chilling. Faint whispers, soft yet distinct, calling his name. The voice was gentle yet insistent, weaving in and out of the wind. He sat up in bed, heart racing, unsure if he was dreaming. The wind must be playing tricks on me, he thought, and tried to convince himself to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. The voices continued, growing louder and more urgent. Panic set in as he realized they were coming from the forest, deep and dark beyond his cabin walls. Summoning the courage, he quietly crept to the window, He peered outside, eyes wide, searching for the source of the voices. The moon hung low, casting eerie shadows, but he saw nothing. The trees looked different in the moonlight, gnarled and crooked, as if they had twisted in pain. Was it his imagination? Or did they seem to lean toward the cabin, their branches reaching out like fingers? Finally, he stepped away from the window and tried to convince himself it was just an animal, a deer perhaps just the wind. But the voices never stopped. They called to him, sweet and sinister, inviting him to step outside, to join them in their midnight dance. The first days passed slowly, filled with beautiful sunlight and bright colors that made the forest seem almost alive. But with each passing day, the calmness began to peel away. Night fell, and the whispers returned, taunting him. "Come out," they beckoned. The man felt as if he was slowly losing grip on reality. During the daytime, he ventured out to explore, hoping to distract himself. He wandered down a narrow path, surrounded by towering trees. Their bark was rough beneath his fingertips, harsh and unforgiving. He noticed huge roots twisting out of the ground, and the path seemed to shift underfoot, making him feel unsteady. It was as if the forest was moving, guiding his every step. Once, he tried to collect firewood, but found that the trees stood closer together than they had the day before. He stumbled upon a fallen branch, but as he reached for it, the ground seemed to shift beneath him, and he nearly fell. That unsettling feeling grew in his chest. "It's just my imagination," he told himself, feeling foolish for thinking such thoughts. But that night, as darkness wrapped around the cabin like a dark blanket, the voices became more distinct. Instead of calling his name, they whispered secrets. "Stay with us," they lured. "You belong here." Each night deepened his sense of dread. Sleep remained elusive, and he began to avoid looking outside, terrified of what he might see. But he could not escape the forest. One afternoon, while eating alone at the rickety kitchen table, he glanced out the window and saw something wild. A pair of eyes glowing back at him from the trees. They flickered in and out of the shadows, never standing still. It felt like he had crossed a line, and the woods were watching, waiting for him to make a move. Desperate to shake the feeling of isolation, he decided to take a long hike, hoping the sea of trees would offer him comfort. He packed a small bag and set out early in the morning. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating a beautiful, dappled effect on the forest floor. But the deeper he walked, the thicker the air became. The whispers began, soft yet persistent, echoing through the branches above him. As he ventured further, the trees grew taller and denser, and the sunlight faded. It felt as if twilight had fallen, even though he knew it was too early for that. He glanced back, but the path behind him seemed to fade away, swallowed by shadows. Panic surged through him, and he turned to push deeper into the forest, hoping to find a way back. Hours passed, each step heavier than the last. The forest was alive with movement. He could hear rustling, and the shadows danced at the corner of his eyes, teasing him. Every time he thought he saw something or someone, it vanished into the underbrush. The sunlight continued to flee, and as night began to fall, so did his sanity. His hopes of retracing his steps faded as darkness wrapped around him. Trapped and alone, he heard the voices grow louder, rising like a windstorm through the trees. "Stay with us," they chanted, filling his mind with chaos. "Join us." Terrified, he ran. He ran through the trees, desperately trying to find a way back. But the trees seemed to shift, their roots grasping at his feet, pulling him away from the cabin. The whispers grew into laughter, twisted and nightmarish, filling the air as he stumbled and fell. When he finally managed to regain his footing, he looked around and saw lights flickering through the trees. Hope surged in him. Perhaps he was close to the cabin. He pushed forward, but the lights danced away, just out of reach. The forest was playing tricks on him, and the overwhelming feeling of despair began to take hold. Finally, he broke through the trees and saw the cabin. Relief flooded through him, but it was short-lived. As he approached, he noticed the door stood slightly ajar. Had he forgotten to close it? Fear snaked through him as he stepped inside. The cabin felt foreign now, almost unwelcoming. Shadows coiled in corners that used to feel safe, and the sense of being watched returned, even more potent than before. Despite the cold gnawing at him, he built a fire and sat in a chair, feeling the warmth wash over him. But it did little to ease his troubled mind. The voices still teased him, a sweet siren call promising comfort, but filled with danger. The hours passed slowly into the night, and he found himself unable to keep his eyes open, struggling to stay awake. He fought against the heaviness pulling at his eyelids. Just as he thought he was about to drift away, a heavy thud echoed outside. Startled, he shot up, his heart racing once more. It sounded like something massive had fallen against the cabin. Tentatively, he crept to the window, heart pounding in his chest. Outside, the moon cast an eerie glow over the landscape. The forest seemed alive, breathing, shifting. He noticed that the trees lined up differently now, closer. They were encroaching upon the cabin, their branches scratching against the windows like skeletal fingers begging for entry. He backed away, breathing heavily. Then came the whispers again, more urgent, more desperate. "Let us in. Join us," they pleaded. The cabin felt like a prison, closing in on him as he felt the presence of the trees behind him, watching his every move. In a rush of fear, he bolted for the door. The moment he opened it, the forest seemed to roar, and the night swallowed him whole. The wind screamed through the trees, drowning out the whispers, replacing them with howls of fury. He was no longer in control. Nature commanded him. Stumbling away from the cabin, he heard laughter again, sweet and enticing, ringing in his ears like a twisted melody. It made him feel dizzy and terrified all at once. The ground beneath him softened, and he realized he was being pulled. Roots sprang from the earth like snakes, snagging his legs, holding him fast. "Help me!" he screamed, panic twisting in his chest. But no one came. The forest was alive, and it wanted him. He could hear the voices of others, previous guests trapped within the trees, their spirits bound to the forest. They called to him, warning him, "Don't let it take you. Don't end up like us." But their voices faded into a cacophony of music, harmonizing with the wind and the whispers that promised him peace. In that moment of despair, he felt himself paralyzed with fear. The trees closed in around him, their branches scratching his arms, pulling him closer. He managed to tear himself away from the roots and stumbled back toward the cabin. It was now a strange shape, warped and twisted. The door gaped open, beckoning him to come in, as if the cabin itself was welcoming him back. With a desperate surge of adrenaline, he sprinted toward the door, but the ground became softer again and roots grabbed his feet, pulling him down. The forest roared, a deafening sound vibrating through the air. "Stay with us." In that moment, he understood it was an offer for eternity, a tempting escape from the world he left behind. But he did not want this. Panic surged one last time, and he screamed with all his might. "No!" He tore free from the roots and threw himself into the cabin just in time. The moment he closed the door, darkness engulfed him. The whisper subsided, and the forest seemed to calm outside, but he felt the weight of the trees pressing in once again. He tried to stand, but the cabin felt as if it were moving beneath him. He stumbled backwards and landed hard against the wooden wall. Just then, the lights flickered and the heavy air became stifling. The forest was still alive, and as long as he was in that cabin, he would never be free. "Stay with us," it whispered, a million voices echoing in unison. He couldn't escape now. The night was eternal, and the forest, that living, breathing thing, had claimed him. In the solitude of the woods, he realized he was not the first, nor would he be the last to lose himself to its dark embrace. And with that thought lingering in his mind, the whispers danced around him, and the trees pressed closer, promising him a new life forevermore. The darkness churned around him like a living entity, and every creak of the cabin sent chills rippling down his spine. Shadows flickered at the corners of his vision, taunting him as he fought to catch his breath. The oppressive silence felt heavy, as if the very walls of the cabin were leaning in, eager to hear his thoughts, to consume them. He could feel the forest breathing outside, and it was hungry. He pressed his back against the wall, hoping to find some solidity in the aged wood. Each thud of his heart echoed in the stillness, a reminder of his humanity amidst the encroaching wilderness. Yet, the whispers returned, slithering through the cracks and crevices, blending into the sound of the wind howling outside. "Join us," they urged, haunting in their softness, echoing the myriad voices that seemed to curl around his mind like smoke. Desperately, he turned away from the windows. The trees gathered in closer around the cabin, their silhouettes warped against the pale moonlight, twisted forms that seemed to beckon him into their embrace. He stumbled toward the kitchen table, searching for something to anchor himself to reality. Perhaps he could find an old knife or some tools to defend himself. The metal would be reassuring, a talisman against the darkness. But as he rifled through the drawers, he found only the remnants of neglect. Dusty jars and cobwebs tangled with old tools, many rusted beyond use. The whispers grew louder, filling the air with their desperate song. "You cannot hide." The voices swirled around him in a chilling harmony, and he felt the breath of the forest against his neck, creeping in closer, wrapping around him like a serpent. "Leave me alone," he shouted, the words bursting forth from his throat with a rawness he hadn't anticipated. The air trembled with his outcry, and for a moment, he thought he sensed a forest recoil. Perhaps he had struck some chord with the entity outside. Perhaps he had reminded it of the very essence of humanity. But as silence returned, he realized it was but an illusion. The wind sighed through the cracks of the cabin, a mournful sound, and the trees began to sway. They seemed to move with a rhythm, a gathering storm conspiring against him. The shadows danced and flickered, and deep within the shrieks of the wind, he swore he could hear laughter, childlike giggles that sent icy fingers down his spine. "No!" he muttered under his breath, shaking his head as if to dispel the phantoms that clawed at the edges of his vision. Fighting the encroaching terror, he forced himself to move, to escape the encroaching despair. He needed to stay busy, to keep his mind off the things that lurked only beyond his sight. He set about checking the windows, securing them against whatever might sweep in next. The wooden panes felt cold beneath his fingers, and with each creak of the frame, he feared the worst. Shadows twisted just beyond the glass, and he caught fleeting glimpses of movement. Not just critters of the night, but shapes that shouldn't exist, figures that seemed to meld with the darkness, phantoms born of the forest depths. As he sealed the last window, a sudden, violent thud crashed into the side of the cabin, rattling the very foundation beneath his feet. He stumbled back, nearly losing his balance. The noise came again, stronger, reverberating through the walls like a heartbeat drumming a swift death march. "Is anyone there?" he shouted, his voice cracking, trembling like a leaf in the storm. Silence responded. The laughter had fallen away, and in its place was a despairing hush that felt even more ominous. He clutched his breath, terror curling around him, wrapping him in thick coils of dread. Instinct kicked in, propelled by an adrenaline rush that surged through his veins. He moved to the door, driven by an impulse to burst out, to confront whatever might be lurking in the night. But as his hand wrapped around the knob, he hesitated. He could feel the energy of the forest swirling just beyond the threshold, a tangible wall of presence that pulsed as if it had a heart of its own, one that beat in sync with the restlessness outside. Pulling back, he turned away from the door. Maybe he could just wait it out, but he couldn't shake the feeling that doing nothing was sealing his fate. The forest was hungry, and he was its prey. The shadows in the corners of the room began to dance again, and his instincts screamed to look away. But he couldn't. The shape flickered, elongated, and as he stared, it seemed to take form. A dark figure, cloaked and headless, looming in the periphery of his vision. His breath caught in his throat, and he could feel the pressure of its gaze, a weight that bore down on him from all sides. "Leave," he rasped, his voice trembling. But the figure didn't shrink back. It advanced slowly, its essence melding with the darkness, becoming one with the very walls of the cabin. The air grew heavy with a foul smell, a mix of decay and damp earth, filling his lungs until he could hardly breathe. The force of it was suffocating, clawing at his throat. He took a step back, heart racing as cold sweat trickled down his spine. "What do you want?" he whispered, feeling the panic rise within him. Time seemed to stretch, elongating the moment as the figure swayed with the rhythm of the night, mocking him with its stillness. It reached out, and he felt an invisible pull draw him closer. His heart thundered as he fought the urge to move forward, to respond to the dark invitation. "You shouldn't be here," it seemed to say, the words curling around him like smoke. In that instant, another cacophony enveloped him, a chorus of voices overlapping, merging into one. "Stay with us," they interwove with the figure's ominous presence. "Join us," they begged in desperation, a plea that echoed to the very air of the cabin. Summoning every ounce of strength, he stepped back, unwilling to yield to their call. He tore himself away from the figure, bolting toward the small fireplace in the corner of the cabin. If he could just find something to defend himself, he might possess a sliver of control over the chilling tide that threatened to sweep him away. But the closer he got, the more he could feel the room shifting, closing in on him. The shadows twisted and morphed, creating a labyrinth of movement around him. He felt as if he was trapped in a dream where the rules of reality no longer applied. He fumbled through the ashes, seeking something, anything, that could ground him in this twisted moment of madness. His fingers brushed against something cold and hard, the metal blade of a small hatchet, perhaps left behind by the cabin's last occupant. Hope surged as he gripped it tightly, the weight of the weapon providing him a momentary sense of security. He turned back toward the figure, brandishing the hatchet, ready to face whatever nightmares this cabin had conjured. "Get away from me," he shouted, the words bursting forth with an unexpected strength, each syllable infused with trepidation. The figure hovered, a momentary stutter in its approach as if taken aback by bravado. But then, the darkness erupted around him. The shadows thickened, congealing into shapes that seemed to writhe and pulse with malicious intent. It felt as if the very walls of the cabin were closing in, and the air thickened with desperation. Ghostly forms twisted within the folds of darkness, limbs stretching and contorting, their faces obscured but their intentions clear. They hovered just out of reach, despair etched into their translucent faces. Their mouths moved, forming silent screams that echoed in his mind, driving the fear deeper into his psyche. With a wild scream, he swung the hatchet toward the dark figure, and the weapon passed harmlessly through it, as if the entity were nothing more than mist. The sound of metal striking would reverberated through the space, and panic surged within him. "No!" he cried, backing away. The laughter returned, sharp and cruel, filling every corner of the small cabin. "You cannot escape." The shadows thickened around him, a tide of darkness rising up, their movement a choreographed dance of terror. With no choice left, he lunged for the door, throwing it open with a force that rattled the frame. But as he stepped outside, he was met with an overwhelming sight. The forest had transformed. The trees stood like monoliths, their trunks thicker, their branches woven together in a cage of darkness, cutting off any avenue of escape. Behind him, the cabin loomed, an entity alive with malice. The wind howled, a banshee cry that pierced the night and sent the shadows swirling. He stood there, rage and fear coiling together in his gut, desperate for a way out, desperate for light. "Leave me be," he shouted into the void, holding the hatchet like a shield, but there was nowhere to go. The forest had conspired against him, and he was just one more soul caught in its snare. As the laughter faded into the wind, a low rumbling started in the ground, resonating through his bones. The trees began to sway, leaning toward him, beckoning with their twisted branches. The very earth felt alive, pulsing underfoot as he staggered backward. Panic surged, and his instincts screamed for him to run, but there was nowhere to hide. "What do you want from me?" he screamed into the night, his voice stripped of bravado, a cornered animal desperate for escape. "Join us," The endless chorus returned, a cacophony that filled the air with an irresistible pull. "Stay with us." He staggered backward, feet fumbling on the uneven ground as the weight of their words pressed down upon him. Just then, amidst the swirling shadow, he saw movement, a face etched with sorrow, her eyes hollow and lost, trapped between the living world and this dark place. It was one of the wraiths, a woman whose visage was smeared by the shadows. "Help us," she whispered, her voice a haunting echo that shimmered in the night air, pulling at something within him, beckoning him toward her. The moment was surreal. He blinked, trying to will the vision away, shaking his head violently. But with each movement, the darkness deepened, and suddenly more faces emerged, men and women, children too. Each one frozen in a look of despair, their features twisting in agony. "Please," they chorused, "help us." Realization crashed over him like a wave, the weight of their collective sorrow crashing into him. These were souls lost to the forest, consumed by its darkness, trapped in endless torment. They were the remnants of those who had succumbed to the lure of the trees, now nothing more than phantoms wandering the twilight. But there was something deeper, an understanding of the fate that awaited him if he didn't escape. They weren't merely calling him to join them, they were warning him. The trees, a man's voice whispered, low and mournful, "They hunger." With a surge of determination, he turned and ran, forcing himself to push past the grasping shadows. "Not me, not me," he shouted as he tore through the underbrush. It snagged at him, branches clawing at his clothes, but he would not relent. He would not let them take him. The darkness nipped at his heels, and he could feel the cold whispers clawing at his sanity, promising solace, the sweet lure of oblivion. But he couldn't yield. He would not give in to the shadows that swirled around him. He darted through the trees, desperate for the path, some sign of the life he once knew. The leaves rustled angrily above him, the branches bending like accusing fingers. The forest seemed to conspire against him, pulling in every direction, branches cracking, the ground shifting beneath him like a restless breath. With a final burst of energy, he lunged forward, crashing through the barrier of brush and into a clearing, a stark, open space that felt like a gasp of freedom. But even in this moment of reprieve, he felt their presence pressing in, the whispers echoing behind him, begging him to return. The moon hung high, illuminating the clearing, and for the first time, he felt the weight of silence settle around him, almost comforting amidst the chaos. He paused to catch his breath, heart racing, glancing back at the tree line. The shadows danced just beyond, ghostly figures waiting, their eyes glowing with an insatiable hunger. "Stay with us," echoed through the clearing, the primal call binding him tighter than ever. In that moment, he knew he had to fight, not just for his life, but for the lives of those lost to the darkness. With the hatchet still clutched in his hand, he raised it high, feeling it pulse with some renewed energy. "I fight for my freedom," he yelled into the night, unsure if anyone could hear him. But knowing he had to make a stand, the trees shifted, and the voices momentarily faltered. "Help us," the wraiths cried out, their voices rising with desperation, the sorrow in their tones a chilling reminder of his own vulnerability. He could feel their eyes, hundreds of them, all watching, waiting, anticipating his next move. The urge to succumb to the darkness clawed at him, but he pushed back against it, drawing power from the very resistance that burned in his chest. He charged forward, defying the gravity of despair that threatened to pull him back into the embrace of the woods. The darkness roared in response, a thunderous cacophony that reverberated through his bones. Twisted branches lashed at him like tentacles, seeking to entangle him once more, but he leaped and weaved, evading their grasp. Each breath was punctuated by the sound of his racing heart, the rhythm akin to a war drum calling him forth into battle against the oppressive gloom. As he sprinted across the clearing, the ground felt alive, pulsing beneath his feet, a throbbing reminder of the power nestled in the roots below. He could feel the ancient sadness of the forest whispering through the air, urging him to stop, to submit, but he wouldn't. The wails of the lost souls echoed through his mind like a chant, their pleas mingling with the rustling leaves, their faces haunting his every thought. "Help us!" the voices cried, weaving a tapestry of despair that wrapped around him, drawing ever closer. Each time he resisted, the pull became more potent, as though the very essence of the forest was feeding off his fear and determination. He noticed something strange among the trees, a flicker of movement that made his instincts flare. In his peripheral vision, he caught a glimpse, a tall shadow darting between the trunks, its form flickering like the flames of a fire, a grotesque parody of the human shape. It moved with an unnatural fluidity, slipping in and out of focus as if it were made of the very shadows that clung to the night. He felt a chill creep up his spine, a sense of deep foreboding washing over him. With every step he took toward the edge of the clearing, the brightness of the moon seemed to dim, casting long shadows that stretched toward him like fingers of darkness. The soft glow that illuminated his path faltered, the glimmering silver light worn thin by the encroaching night. He could feel the temperature dropping, the air growing heavy with unresolved anguish. Suddenly, a piercing scream sliced through the stillness, a haunting sound that sent shivers racing down his spine. He spun around, heart pounding, scanning the treeline for the source of the sound. The voices of the lost became a frantic chorus, echoing their despair as the forest swayed ominously around him. Each whisper seemed to carry a fragment of a story. Tales of lives intertwined with the haunted woods, souls bound forever to the shadows that cradled them. Then he saw her, the ghastly woman trapped at the edge of the trees, her face twisted in pain, mouth agape in a silent scream. Her eyes glowed with a deep sorrow, reflecting the moonlight like twin pools of darkness. She reached out toward him, fingers trembling as if grasping for something beyond reach. "Help me," she breathed, her voice a mere whisper that wrapped around him like a fog. He wanted to rush to her aid, to save her from her torment, but something deep within him screamed in warning. He could feel the weight of her despair bearing down on him. The very air shimmered with a sinister energy, and he knew if he stepped closer, he might lose himself in her sorrow, trapped like the others. "Stay back," he shouted, raising the hatchet as a barrier between them. "I can't help you. I won't let you take me." The woman's expression shifted, desperation morphing into something darker. Her mouth twisted into a ghastly grin, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth that shone menacingly in the dim light. "You are one of us now," she hissed, her voice now a chilling growl. There is no escape. The shadows around him surged, a dark tide rising to envelop him, pulling him toward her with a force he couldn't resist. The laughter of the forest echoed around him, twisted and cruel, filling his mind with dread. Desperately, he swung the hatchet, the metal glistening as it sliced through the air. The blade connected with the darkness, but instead of cutting through the shadows, it vanished as if it had struck nothing at all. The laughter grew louder, mocking him with every failed attempt. He staggered back, breathing heavily, scanning the darkness for any sign of hope. Panic and despair clashed within him, a tempest forged in fear. "Join us." The chorus of voices pressed in closer, wrapping around him like a suffocating blanket. Shadows moved, morphing into ghastly figures, entities of despair, forever trapped in the gaping maw of the forest. They were a relentless tide, their forms shifting and flickering, faces contorted in silent screams, eyes void of light. He felt their sorrow seep into his very bones, each heartbeat resonating with their haunting cries. The desperation was palpable, a palpable energy that threatened to drown him in its depths. He could almost feel their hands on him, frigid and insistent, pulling him down into darkness, summoning the last remnants of strength. He broke free from their grasp. He sprinted again, driven by the primal instinct to survive, to break away from this waking nightmare. As he raced through the trees, he became acutely aware of the ground beneath him, springy and alive, shifting with each step he took. Around him, the forest seemed to shift and swirl, branches curling inward as if attempting to reclaim him. He felt the sharpness of bone against his skin, bark peeling away as he brushed against the cruel edges of twisted trees. It was as though the woods had orchestrated this moment, each movement intentional, feeding off the chaos that had consumed him. A scream erupted from his lips as he broke through another barrier of branches, falling onto uneven ground. He rolled to avoid harm, gasping as he pushed himself up. The world around him spun, in a dizzying blur of dark shapes looming tall above. The trees leaned impossibly close, their bark knotting faces, features morphing into grotesque visages that leered down at him with wicked delight. "Flee, little one," a voice breathed seductively, a low whisper that curled around him like fog. "There's nowhere to run. We'll find you." His heart raced at the ominous promise woven into those words. He forced himself to stand, squinting into the darkness, searching for a sign, a path leading away from this hell. The laughter of the forest faded momentarily, replaced by the soft rustling of leaves, the sound almost like a gentle lullaby. But he knew better. The essence of the woods concealed dangerous truths. In the distance, he saw a flicker of light, a dim glow that beckoned him, warm and inviting. Perhaps it was a way out? Hope surged within him as he stumbled toward the light, dodging the outstretched branches that seemed to reach for him. With each step, the laughter grew faint, replaced by whispers of encouragement that brushed against his ears. "Follow the light," they urged, the voices shimmering with the promise of freedom. But the closer he got, the more the darkness clawed at him, tendrils slithering around his ankles as if to trip him, to pull him back into their embrace. He fought against the unseen forces, determination fueling his every movement. The light flickered brighter with that determination, beckoning him closer. He burst into a small clearing bathed in the silver glow of moonlight, saturated with a shimmering brilliance that seemed to ward off the oppressive shadows. Every inhalation brought clarity. Every exhale released the darkness that cloaked him. The trees stood guard at the edges, their gnarled branches twisted into watchful silhouettes. Here, the air felt different, lighter. At the heart of the clearing, an old stone well stood, its structure worn but timeless. The stone glistened under the moonlight, a reflection of his own fierce resolve. He stumbled toward it, breathless, and peered inside. Darkness stared back at him from the depths, an abyss that promised secrets long buried. The wisps of the forest still clung to him, but now they were hesitant, like shadows afraid of the light. He felt the warmth of the well even before he sensed the whisper's changing tone, dipping into a darker register as if anticipating what he might find. As he leaned over the well, a chill shot through him. The air grew thick, suffocating him as the voices swirled in a frenzied rush, tumbling over each other as they clawed for his attention. "Don't look!" they cried out, the urgency in their tones slashing through the air. But it was too late. His gaze had already fallen into the depths, and the darkness began to pulse, revealing images flash by. Lost souls trapped in states of anguish, each one replaying their last moments of despair. He felt their pain, a sharp knife of grief that pierced through him. Faces etched with terror whirled in the blackness, shadows darting around him in chaos. A sudden vision appeared, clearer than the rest. A boy, no older than 10, stood at the edge of the forest, eyes wide with fear, his small body trembling with dread. The scene shifted in a heartbeat. Now the boy was running, laughing children in a flower-filled meadow behind him, the brightness of life stark against the encroaching shadows. Then tragedy struck. The sky darkened, the trees loomed larger, and the boy was beckoned into the fray, lost among the shadows. "Please," the boy's voice echoed, filled with anguish, intertwining with the chorus of the lost. "Help me." Tears streamed down his face as he felt the weight of countless souls condensing around him. They were crying out, pleading for release. Anguish and fury surged within him, their torment igniting a fire deep within. "No!" he screamed, his voice rising above the cacophony. "I will not let you take me." In a surge of determination, he reached down into the well, fingers gripping the stone's edge. "I will fight for you," he declared, feeling the overwhelming presence of despair rise up and cling to him like a shroud. He couldn't save them all, but he could save himself. The darkness erupted in fury, shadows swirling as if the well had broken, and he was thrust into the heart of a storm. He reeled back, eyes wide, as vision after vision poured forth, each more horrifying than the last. People trapped in a cycle of torment, constantly drawn back to this cursed forest. Screams echoed in his mind, pummeling him with grief. The weight of their sorrow threatened to collapse him, but he stood firm, summoning every ounce of willpower he possessed. Their cries blended into a single voice, a heartbreaking symphony of despair and longing. "Save us!" He didn't know if he could, but he had to try. Clenching his jaw, he forced himself to focus, summoning the light that flickered in the clearing, an ember against the overwhelming shadow. "I will free us," he roared, feeling his own voice transform into something vibrant, something powerful, an anthem against the crushing darkness. With that proclamation roiling in his chest, he pivoted, facing the encroaching shadows with renewed vigor. It was time to reclaim his life and the lives of those trapped within the woods. The light surrounding him flared brilliant and consuming, a radiant shield against despair. As he stood at the edge of the well, he felt the energy of the forest shift, as if taking a collective breath. The laughter faltered, and the whispers grew fainter, caught in the whirlwind of his defiance. With a mighty swing, he struck the hatchet against the well stones, a precise arc intended to sever the ties that bound him to their realm. The blow echoed with finality. The ground vibrated beneath him, roots and darkness quaking as he cried out one final time. "No more!" The cabal of anger and energy surged through the clearing, an explosion of light that forced the darkness to retreat. Guttural cries filled the air. The screams now morphed into banshee wails, and the shadows twisted and writhed, fighting against the light that threatened to consume them. With every ounce of strength he pushed forward, determined to cleanse the woods of their torment. He could feel the souls of the lost swelling behind him, their energies mingling in a brilliant tapestry of light as they broke free of the chains that had held them captive. "Let go!" he commanded, and for the first time, the whisper subsided, allowing room for something more profound: hope. The shadows curled away, gnashing in rage, yet helpless against the might of the light that cascaded through the clearing. It shimmered and glowed, illuminating the terror that had wrapped around these woods for too long. Spectral faces flashed before him, their features melting away into the night, transforming into a shimmering eruption of light, releasing years of anguish. He could feel it, yearning as each soul broke free, weaving into the delicate fabric of existence, creating a bridge between the world of the living and the spectral realm. Hope streamed through the clearing, a torrent of energy that soared high into the sky, leaving behind nothing but echoes of their cries. And then, silence. The haunting whispers snuffed out, replaced by a pristine stillness that settled over the woods. The moon hung high, casting a calm light across the clearing, and for the first time he felt peace. He breathed deeply, feeling the weight lifting from his heart, a relief that surged through his very being. But even amidst the solace, he knew this was merely the calm before the storm. A shiver traveled down his spine as he surveyed the clearing, the overwhelming sense of calm contrasting sharply with the turmoil that had just transpired. It felt as if the forest was holding its breath, anticipating the shift in energy, the space that had opened for both healing and tragedy. The trees, once looming giants, now appeared almost serene, their branches swaying delicately as if in reverence to the freedom won within the twilight hue. "Is it over?" he whispered into the stillness, half expecting an answer, a ghostly echo bouncing back to him from the shadows. But the only reply was a gentle rustling of leaves, the soft embrace of the night surrounding him, thick and heavy yet sprinkled with the memory of the released souls. Yet, deep within him, a gnawing unease took root. The remnants of darkness still lingered in the air, a chill that coiled around his bones. He turned, glancing back towards the well, now silent but whispering its own secrets. He approached it cautiously, the stone still glistening with a damp sheen, reflecting the fractured remnants of light. A flicker stirred at the edges of his vision. Movement within the depths, shadows morphing into unfamiliar shapes, grotesque images pushing against the confines of reality. Just as he turned his way to escape the sight, a low, guttural growl rumbled from the shadows beyond the trees. Instinctively, his heart raced, adrenaline flooding his system again. The call of the forest had not ceased. The laughter remained buried, layers of darkness still pulsing beneath the surface. It was a warning, a clear signal that the battle was far from over. He quickly stepped back, sweat streaming down his brow as he strained his ears. The growl grew louder, accompanied by a multitude of others, their synchronicity weaving into an echoing dread. The trees seemed to twist in alignment, their forms elongating, stretching toward him with claw-like branches, hungry for flesh. His pulse quickened as the darkness around the clearing felt alive, as if it were a thick fog that rolled in, creeping eagerly toward his feet. He could sense their agitation, the whispers transforming into a frenzy of hissing and scratching, the shadows merging into dark, indistinct figures that surged forth from the underbrush. A flash of terrifying realization dawned on him. These were not mere remnants of the lost souls. They were the forest itself, nurtured by their despair, feeding ferociously upon the suffering it had evoked. He had released their captives, but in doing so, had he unwittingly provoked the dark heart of the woods? Fear propelled him backward, but the clearing felt constraining, the very earth seeking to swallow him whole. The growls escalated into a monstrous roar, a cacophony that seemed to shake the leaves from the trees, sending them swirling around him. He stumbled, awareness blurring as he turned and ran, the instinct to flee gripping him tightly. The shadows tailed him, a relentless, viscous mass spilling forth from the trees in furious pursuit. He could feel them closing in, their cold breath at his back, a scorching dread that licked at his heels. He dashed into the deeper woods once more, branches clawing at him, scraping his arms, drawing blood as he tore through the undergrowth. Each echoing growl resonated through his mind as he fought to evade their clutches, weaving through the trees while the darkness slithered and surged behind him, hungry for the warmth of his living flesh. The forest transformed into a labyrinth of nightmares, shadows dancing with malicious intent. Trying to focus, he recalled the light, the brilliance that had pushed back despair. It had been born from his own strength. The thought fueled him as he ran blindly, searching for any hint of the illumination that might save him. Behind him, he felt the weight of a presence, something larger, more profound than the ghosts he had witnessed. The ground thudded beneath him, each stomp heavy and resonating like a war drum, amplifying his fear even further. Daring a glance over his shoulder, he caught a glimpse, a hulking beast emerging from the shadows, a nightmare-given form. Its eyes burned an unholy hue, glimmering with malice, and its maw dripped dark and ichor, dripping like dreadful tendrils of liquid terror. A choke of fear lodged in his throat. It was not just the lost souls he had released. An ancient predator lurked within the forest, awakened by the turmoil he had conjured. "Keep moving," he shouted to himself, fighting against the paralysis of dread gripping his heart. Each step felt like a heavy weight pulling him backward, but he broke free of the immobilizing fear, pushing forward with every ounce of strength he could muster. The growling intensified as he stumbled deeper into the darkened thickets, branches clawing at him, shadows warping to become claws relentlessly snagging at his clothes. The forest had turned against him, twisted by forces he could hardly comprehend. Out of breath yet unwilling to relent, he burst through a thicket into a wider clearing, panic recklessly coursing through him. In this newly opened space, the air felt charged, electrified with an energy both alluring and terrifying. Without warning, a whisper curled through the air, a sweet, melodic sound interlaced with yearning. "Join us." The entreatment wove around him, wrapping him in a seductive haze, a pull toward an overwhelming darkness that hovered on the fringes of the clearing. He shook his head painfully, the echo of that voice driving deep into his psyche. Even as he fought against the invasive compulsion, images rushed forth, shadowed figures beckoning him, their delicate hands outstretched in invitation. "No!" he shouted weakly, gritting his teeth as he forced himself to confront the malevolent sway. "I won't be swallowed by the abyss." With renewed resolve, he focused on the distant trees glimmering faintly beyond the edges of the clearing, where a glimmer of hope thrummed on the horizon. He turned toward that hope, sprinting with every ounce of strength still left within him. The shadows crashed behind him, a fury of bodies lunging in pursuit, a wave of terror threatening to engulf him. He could hear their voices, a haunting chorus that echoed eerily in the stillness, taunting him as he ran. "Stay," they called, weaving through the night. Their greedy fingers danced just out of reach, reclaiming the magical essence they once lost. They skirted the edges of his mind, leading him deeper into despair as he fought to maintain his grip on reality. "And oh!" he roared, veering off toward the trees, desperate to escape their pull as he sailed to the last steps toward the glimmering veins of light. But that escape was fraught with danger. The forest seemed to conspire against him, twisting itself into a wretched maze designed to ensnare him. Each step drawing him deeper into the fray, shadows consuming his perception. With a feral scream, he plummeted headfirst between the trees, branches whipping against his skin like lashes, the night cold wrapping him in layers of dread. He landed roughly on soft, moss-covered ground, gritting his teeth against the pain that flared through his limbs. He forced himself to rise, but dread clawed at his being, desperate shadows swirling close behind. Gazing toward the thicket where he could detect faint lights blinking, the ones that called him back to reality. He struggled to breathe, felt his lungs catch in the vice of terror gripping him tight. "Not today!" His voice rang out, defiant and booming, echoing off the ancient trunks that loomed like silent sentinels, watching his plight. He surged forward, adrenaline coursing through his veins, a hearty shudder of survival igniting the fight within him even as shadows clawed for his life. Pursued and tormented, he burst into another clearing. A circular enclave shimmered with an ethereal glow. Flickering orbs danced through the air, weaving a tantalizing web of light that temporarily dulled the agonizing darkness infringing upon him. Here, the forest seemed at odds with itself, trapping him in a realm suspended between the beauty of luminescence and the ominous weight of dark energies waiting to pounce. He slowed momentarily, entranced by the delicate dance of the lights, entrapped by the delicate balance of light and darkness competing for his soul. As if awakening from a dream, he caught movement at the edge of his vision. A creature emerged from the darkness, garbed in shadows, its physique shrouded in an aura of malice. It lumbered toward him, obsidian eyes gleaming with malevolence as the very air thickened around it, a cloud of nightmares spiraling forth. With every approaching footfall, a memory flickered through his mind. The pain of lost lives and fettered spirits, of entrapment and despair sculpted by this dark realm. They were glimpses passing briefly before him, images of sorrow evaporating into nothingness just as quickly as they appeared. "Help us!" They echoed softly, a shadowed chorus that danced around his senses, harmonies merging into a cacophony of despair. "Enough!" he shouted, the words launching forth from a place of deep conviction. He felt the flicker of warmth return, a pulse of energy igniting as he conjured forth the light within him. "I'm not bound by you." The orbs around him surged, igniting with newfound brilliance, illuminating the clearing like a beacon against the swirling darkness. The shadows recoiled and the creature faltered, its confidence disrupted by the dawning illumination. He pushed forward, the light brightening with every step, a fire against the chilling ire of the creature that moved against him. But the darkness was relentless, arms reaching out, shadows rearing back as they threatened to absorb the light that fought so valiantly to remain. Yet he stood determined, digging deep within himself as he conjured memories of hope, the faces of the liberated souls swirling in vibrant mirages around him. "Fight!" he called to them, feeling their essence swell around him, contributing to the pulse of the light that crackled in rage. They had not been lost forever. Redemption could still blossom in their wake. The battle raged beyond him, the flickering orbs intensifying as he took a bold stance against the creature. It snarled in response, bending the very darkness to its will as it lunged forward, a grotesque fusion of shadows and malice determined to snuff out the light he held dear. But he charged, meeting its despair head-on, the light exploding forth from his core, illuminating the forest with a brilliance that painted everything in a vivid hue of hope and determination. The dark entity howled, the sound reverberating through the woods, sending shockwaves rippling through the creatures hidden in shadow. The surge of burning energy met its force, clashing fiercely like trapped storms, each competing for the soul of the woods, a focal point of power pushing against the brink of annihilation. He pressed forward, heart pounding as the tranquility and chaos danced violently around him. He could feel the grip of darkness loosening, the symbols of agony entrenched within the woods trembling in uncertainty. Yet dread lingered, a sensation prickling at the edges of his consciousness. A cold whisper slithered through the trees, shivering through his bones. Remnants of forgotten souls swirled in the air around him, desperate for release amidst the chaos. "Join us," they beckoned, softer now, more insistent. Shadows writhed, coalescing into familiar forms, faces lost among the cacophony, their voices weaving like thin threads, trembling with sorrow. "Don't listen," he fought back, shaking his head as flashes of horror pulsed through him, memories of anguish betraying his resolve. "Your time is over." In a final burst of willpower, he charged at the creature, energy coursing through him like wildfire, igniting the very fabric of the forest with the brilliance of truth. Blazing with purity, the vibrant pulse enveloped him, wrapping him in an indomitable shield against the consuming shadows. The howl of the darkness pierced through the air, and he struck with every ounce of force, connecting with the creature that reeked of despair. A blinding light radiated outwards, washing over the clearing, driving shadows back, forcing them away until only the faintest flickers remained, those lost echoes fading like breath upon chilled glass. "Be free," he screamed, releasing the torrent of light that surged forth, a magnificent wave sweeping through everything in its path, scattering the darkness that had burdened the woods for too long. With a tremendous crash, the shadows fractured, twisting and crumbling as they dissipated, the agonizing tumult collapsing into victorious silence. The air filled with a palpable vibrancy, a burst of clarity that kissed the world with an ethereal glow. Panting, he stared into the distance where the trees slowly revealed their silhouettes against the sky that glimmered with stars, bright and undiluted, unmarred by despair. He felt tears stream down his face, a release of pent-up agony, a cleansing of longing. And in that moment of clarity, he understood what he had fought against would no longer reign in his heart. He could move forward. He was free. Yet, deep within the recesses of the forest stood an ominous reminder of the battle fought. A fleeting glimpse of shadow shifting among the trees, remnants that would always linger, waiting in the dark. And though light rebounded triumphantly through the woods around him, a flicker of doubt stirred in the pit of his stomach. The darkness may have been repelled, but it hadn't vanished entirely. It festered in corners, hidden in wait. For even the most vibrant light could cast shadows. The remnants of the darkness hung heavy in the air, a palpable reminder that the battle waged was far from over. As he stood in the clearing, breathless and trembling, the flickers of light around him began to fade, their warmth retreating like the last dregs of sunlight at dusk. He felt a stirring at the back of his mind, a gnawing sensation that the shadows had their eyes on him still, lurking just at the periphery of visibility. The forest, now ostensibly peaceful, hid its own dark scars, whispers of dread woven into the tapestry of trees, and the roots twisted as though they were writhing in agony. The sounds of night deepened, each rustle of leaves and crack of twigs sounding like footsteps, echoing the primal fear stirring within him. He willed himself to remain courageous, but he sensed the gaze of unseen watchers, the weight of 1,000 sorrows pressing down on him. "Is anyone there?" he called, his voice carrying uncertainly through the stillness. Each syllable hung in the air, suspended as if afraid to descend into the shadows. But all that answered him was the echo of his question, mocking him from the depths of the wood. He stepped back cautiously, scanning the tree line for any movement. The dense thickets felt claustrophobic now, the air thickening with a shimmering intensity that made his skin prickle. Suddenly, without warning, a flicker of movement darted through the underbrush, a shadow flitting between the trees so quickly it felt almost unreal. He held his breath, heart hammering as he squinted into the darkness, searching for a glimpse of whatever had disturbed the night. Was it merely a trick of the light, a spirit that had lost its way? But instinct gnawed at him, urging caution, and he took a slow step back, feeling the cool earth beneath his foot, feeling grounded yet unsteady. The temperature seemed to drop, chilling him to the bone as the whispers began anew, rippling through the trees like a sinister breeze, twisting around him with malicious intent. "Join us," they crooned again, the seduction of their voices ethereal, beckoning him toward the heart of darkness. He forced his eyes shut, blocking out their dissonant harmony, but visions flooded in. Faces twisted in torment, fingers clawing at nothingness, pleading to be saved from their eternal suffering. Shadows writhed just beyond the trees, growing more pronounced, limbs elongating from the darkness as though grasping for something they desperately desired. "No!" he shouted defiantly, the word bursting forth in a mix of dread and resolve. But in response, the forest roared to life. A cacophony of screeches echoed from the branches as unseen entities stirred. The leaves rustled and whispered, as though relaying secrets of the ancients, unmasking truths concealed by centuries of despair. The ground trembled beneath him, and the shadows danced recklessly, coalescing into shapes he couldn't quite decipher. It clutched at his senses, spiraling into an overwhelming sense of dread. "Come play," they lured, the words curling around his mind, mean-spirited laughter echoing amidst the trees. In a moment of sheer terror, he took off running, feet pounding against the terrain, the world blurring past him. The shadows surged behind him, flickering just out of sight but ever present, whispering taunts of his frail existence. "Don't run from us," they hissed, voices like serpents slithering through his thoughts, darting into crevices of fear. "You cannot escape what you are." Branches clawed at him as he careened through the underbrush, the sharp, splintered edges scraping against his skin. He stumbled but immediately regained composure, a primal urge to survive igniting something raw and fierce within him. Yet no matter how fast he ran, the sounds of their pursuit grew ever closer, a frenzied cacophony that urged him to give in to despair. In the corners of his eyes, dark forms began to manifest, flickers of nightmare that lurked just outside the realm of his understanding. With panic flooding his system, he broke through another thicket and fell into a clearing he vaguely recognized, the site of the battle that had consumed his every ounce of hope. The air here retained remnants of the energy that once surged so vibrantly, now subdued but still charged with a potent, aching sorrow. He staggered forward, chest heaving as he tried to comprehend the landscape before him. The glimmering orbs, once alive with light, now lay quivering on the ground, a constellation of forgotten dreams waiting to be rekindled. And yet, a chill washed over him, creeping down his spine as shadows solidified along the edge of the clearing. The creature that had haunted his every thought stepped forward, emerging from the draping darkness, a grotesque amalgamation of form and shadow, eyes like pits of despair boring into his very soul. "Did you think you could cast us aside?" it growled, its voice a symphony of anguish layered with malicious triumph. His heart raced, a battle cry yearning to escape his lips. Instead, fear paralyzed him, rooted him to the spot as the creature's vile presence stretched across the clearing, congealing the light into a feeble glow. It was as if the very essence of the forest dampened under its weight. Holding its breath in anticipation of a reckoning, he stumbled back, pulse echoing in his ears when suddenly the shadows surged, slithering over the ground until they twisted into conical shapes, posing as figures he recognized. People he had once known, faces marred by anguish, flickering like old photographs in a rarefied air. "Why didn't you save us?" one voice wailed, the eyes filled with desperation and betrayal. Another figure drifted closer, face softened by a sorrowful smile, but the darkness wrapped tightly around it, tainting the beauty with despair. Join us. We're not lost. We can still find peace together. The tendrils of darkness closed in, wrapping around his ankles, pulling him closer to despair's embrace. No! He cried out, a primal scream boiling within him as he wrestled against the grasp of the past, fighting against the shadows that urged him to submit. With wild determination, he tore himself from the embrace of the past, the shadows coiling around him, tightening but not breaking his resolve. You are not real. I will not be shackled by your grief. The shadows flickered in response, wailing as they dissolved into a vortex of despair and rage, spiraling around the clearing in a dance of fury. He moved toward the remnants of light, the flickering orbs, and fueled by the memory of those he had lost, spent and redeemed. Together, he yelled, the words ripping from his throat and colliding with the darkness, sending shockwaves through the thicket. The vibrant light surged in response, throbbing like a heartbeat, expanding in brilliance until it illuminated even the darkest corners of the shadows. But the creature was relentless, roaring in fury as it lashed out, sharp tendrils striking at him with blinding speed. One connected, biting deep, ripping through flesh and sending him sprawling back against the earthen floor. Pain shot through him, a cold flood that wrapped around his heart and threatened to consume him as he gasped in shock. However, beneath the fog of agony, he felt a flicker of light, the call of hope sparking anew. Gritting his teeth, he fought through the pain, summoning the memories he had pushed away, calling upon every joy, every moment of love and laughter, intertwining it with the essence of those he had lost. With a deadened breath, he reached deep within himself, touching the core of that light, resurrecting it into a whirlpool of energy radiating forth with staggering brilliance. He stood, defiance igniting anew as the shadows recoiled, screeching in terror as their dominion began to crumble beneath the overwhelming radiance. Suddenly, a beam of pure light erupted from him, a torrent cascading outward, obliterating the clutches of darkness that had threatened to claim him. The clearing blazed like a sun, illuminating the very roots of despair that had plagued the forest's heart. The creature screamed, its form disintegrating into a swirl of smoke and shadows, shrieks echoing through the woods until it was nothing but a wisp fading into oblivion. The figures flickered, their faces twisted in confusion, drifting away like ashes on the wind. The shadows began to scatter, retreating into the depths as sunlight shimmered through the canopy of leaves, streaming down to touch the earth with warmth. Be free, he shouted again, and this time the forest heaved, the bonds of sorrow shattering under the relentless light. But even as the echoes of despair dwindled, an unsettling sensation tinged the air. Something remained, a latent whisper cutting through the fatigue that crept over him. The shadows lingered, not entirely vanquished but transformed, their forms morphing into shapes more subtle, weaving through the trees and thickening the air with a nervous tension. With energy spilling from his fingertips, he dared to take a step forward, echoing the bravery he'd conjured in the depths of despair. But the shadows' pulse thickened, as if they were awaiting a signal, unified under an unseen command. A low, guttural growl reverberated through the clearing, swelling in intensity until the very ground trembled beneath his feet. From between the trees, a figure loomed, larger, more sinister, darker than anything he had encountered thus far. Did you think you could cleanse the forest so easily? It taunted, its voice laced with a chilling calm that sent shivers down his spine. He could feel the air grow dense, heavier than it had been before, magnifying the terror that flickered within his chest. The entity drifted closer, an amalgamation of shadows and anger, obscured and chaotic yet eerily composed, an ever-present darkness, now unmistakably at the forefront of the battle he had ignited. No, he whispered, courage dwindling as a chill snaked through his bones. The figure's form twisted and elongated, a fusion of nightmares he could barely comprehend. It lingered between the trees, A monstrous distortion of everything he had imagined, a dark reminder of what lay beyond the veil of light. "Why do you resist?" It taunted again, gaze piercing through him, weighty and solemn. "You are but a flicker, a spark in the night. Your light can only be extinguished by that which you ignore." Shadows swirled around the figure, responding to its presence as though bated breath coursed through the woods. A wave of despair settled around him, thick and suffocating, pulling at his very core as doubts began to seep into every thought. Suddenly, memories, too vivid to be dismissed, flooded his mind. Faces of those he'd lost, horror painted over every detail as despair clawed back into the recesses of his heart. Every fear he'd managed to dispel, every thread of hope he'd so carefully woven into his being, began to unravel beneath the weight of a relentless darkness. "No," he murmured softly, feeling everything he had battled against rise anew. The monstrous figure advanced slowly, shadows curling around it, the air crackling with an energy that felt otherworldly. It held a power unmatched, drawing upon the very fears that had shaped him, the shadows reflecting back every vulnerability, every heartbreak he had ever faced. "Do you understand the scope of your own insignificance?" it whispered, voice slicing through the deceptive calm like a blade. "You think you can repair what has been lost, but it is the sorrow that defines you. You cannot fight what flows through every being, a darkness that cradles comfort in its embrace." Hot tears burned at his eyes, truth shattering the last vestiges of his resolve. The primal scream that erupted tasted of despair. It rose from a well of anguish that gripped his throat as he felt the specters of loss envelop him again. That pain, so achingly familiar, curling about his heart and squeezing tighter. But beneath that despair, a flicker of memory stirred. Faces alight with laughter, moments rendered pristine with radiant joy. A gentle hand on his shoulder, a voice echoing promise. He remembered. Fighting back the shadows, he stood resolute, heart hammering with the recollection of those he cherished, those he had sworn to protect and uplift. "No!" he cried with renewed fervor. "Their light is what gives me strength." The figure hesitated for a fleeting moment, the shadows recoiling as his determination shone brilliantly against the encroaching despair. With every ounce of will, he focused on the fragments of joy, letting them surge through him in a tumultuous wave, countering the darkness that threatened to snuff him out. Together, he roared, light radiating outward with blinding clarity, illuminating not just the clearing, but the very depths of the forest. But the creature would not relent, snarling as the shadows coiled tighter, wrapping around him like suffocating vines. "You cannot escape your fate." And as its fangs poised to strike, he invoked the memory of every bond he had cherished, the laughter, the love, the warmth that lingered in echoes, and within that kaleidoscope of remembrance, he felt the chains of despair begin to crack. "Be gone!" The words erupted from him not as a plea, but as a command, accompanied by a burst of energy that illuminated the darkened thicket. In a moment of profound clarity, the clearing transformed. What had felt like a prison now expanded into a sanctuary of hope, light wrapping. As the pulsing energy surged from within him, it splintered through the shadows, fracturing their malevolent hold and casting them aside like shattered glass. The clearing, once thick with despair, began to transform, the light spilling out in vibrant waves that illuminated the gnarled trees and the darkened spaces between them. But this was no ordinary brightness. It felt alive, alive with the essence of those he loved, imbued with every joyous moment he had ever experienced. It resonated against the very fabric of the forest, reverberating through the roots of ancient trees, sending a tremor through the earth that raised the hair on his arms. The shadowed figure writhing before him hesitated, its dark tendrils faltering beneath the onslaught of light. "Do you truly think your light can overpower the darkness?" it hissed, the voice dripping with disdain. Shadows swirled violently around it, creating a tempest of confusion and fear, and for a fleeting moment, he glimpsed the despair lurking within its depths, a reflection of his own struggles, a twisted echo of himself drowning in the abyss. He stepped forward, each movement igniting the air with purpose, and felt the warmth of the sun illuminating his heart. "You have no power over me," he shouted, his voice breaking through the cacophony of negative thoughts that pricked at the edges of his mind. More shadows fell away as he took another step, the ground beneath them blossoming with fragile flowers that burst forth from the earth as though reclaiming its right to thrive. But the creature was defiant. It reared back, its form shifting and warping, becoming more amorphous, the shadows swirling around it clinging like a shroud. "You are nothing but a leaf caught in a storm," it snarled, a flicker of anger slicing through its hissing words. "You are not meant to shine, only to fade." With a shriek, the creature lunged forward, its elongated claws aimed directly at his heart, a terrifying darkness threatening to consume his light entirely. He braced himself, the tendrils of fear clawing at his resolve, but instead of succumbing, he focused inward, summoning the memories of those etched forever in his heart. The warmth of family gatherings, laughter at the silliness of life, the rugged affection of friends gathered around a campfire. Those moments now erupted in fierce clarity, filling him with strength and purpose. "No!" he bellowed, the air around him thrumming with newfound energy. "I will not succumb to your despair." The light within him peaked, exploding outward in a dazzling wave that sent the shadows reeling backward, crashing against one another like waves against a rocky shore. Yet, there was still an unsettling sensation lurking in the edges of the battlefield. The air crackled with tension, warning him of the darkness that continued to loiter, unfazed by his light. In the writhing mass of shadow, he could see faces emerging, distorting and whispering in agony. Dark tendrils transformed into human features, a twisted mask of longing and sorrow. For a split second, he felt recognition wash over him. Friends lost, agonizing fates that had been dragging him down into that dark void. He staggered back, the faces morphing into a grotesque montage of everything he had feared becoming. "Don't give in to the phantoms of your past," a voice suddenly whispered from the depths of his memories, a familiar echo from his childhood. Familiar, but distorted, making the name tremble as it dared to impose itself. "You are more than your grief. You carry their light within you." With fierce determination, he straightened, piercing through the tempest of despair that threatened to drown him. "You will not take me." As if responding to his defiance, the shadows roared, swirling ravenously in a whirlwind of darkness. The forest shook with a resonance that vibrated through his core, taunting his resolve as branches snapped and leaves flew violently through the air. "What do you want?" he shouted, clenching his fists, feeling the energy struggle against the darkness, an ethereal ballet battling for supremacy. There was a moment of silence and eerie calm as the shadows coalesced, pulling together into a more coherent form, a monstrous entity writhing beneath the chaos. "I want to show you the truth of your existence, the futility of your fight that rests upon the fragile dreams of light." The words crashed around him, heavy as a storm cloud, pulling him under the weight of their meaning. Images dredged from the depths of his mind began to play before him. Every missed opportunity, every sorrow he had buried, resurfacing like dark waves crashing against a rocky shore. He could see the faces of loved ones, each one pulling back, slipping through his fingers as the darkness wrapped around him tightly, squeezing the air from his lungs. "You cannot escape it," it whispered, voice dripping with satisfaction. "The light may shine on the surface, but deep within, despair waits to claim you." He staggered, knees trembling beneath the weight of anguish, but then recalled the warmth of love that surged through his veins, illuminating the deepest recesses of his spirit. "You are nothing without the light," he burst forth, voice echoing through the clearing, igniting tendrils of hope that exploded outward with shimmering brilliance. Suddenly, the shadows reared back, momentarily startled by the intensity of his resolve. He surged forward, casting everything he had into the vortex of light, rallying every joyful memory, every beautiful moment that embraced him, unleashing them to the world. The creature, caught off guard, became a mere silhouette against the radiance that poured forth, thrown back as the brilliance washed over it like waves against the shoreline. But as the darkness receded, he felt a surge of resistance rising from the entity, a chilling reality washing over him as it began to solidify again, darker than before. "This isn't finished," it spat, its voice hollow and cruel, resonating through the now brightened clearing. "You may push me back, but shadows are resilient. They remember every wound, every regret." The shadows writhed and gathered, coiling menacingly as the darkness festered, the air turning colder. The figures swelled in malice, twisting into grotesque forms that mirrored his greatest fears. The faces reflecting the isolation he had hidden from, regret clawing at his resolve. "No!" he cried, fighting against the images flooding his mind, desperately pushing back as he took a step forward, hands still glowing with the light of his memories. With every heartbeat, the atmosphere thickened, tension binding within the space like a taut string about to snap. "You think you can drown out my cries with your memories?" the creature shrieked, moving forward again, shadows swirling like a storm, dark claws stretching threateningly towards him. But he was resolute, digging deep for strength. "Your cries are drowned in the love I carry with me," he proclaimed, vision clearing as the radiant energy pulsed from him, raining in hope with every second. Yet the creature was unyielding, the shadows flaring back as they rushed toward him in a maddening whirl. "You have no idea the power that lays within despair. You're about to be reminded of your own truths." It seethed, claws slicing through the air, aimed straight for his heart. The ground vibrated as if the very forest was sharing in the turmoil, branches writhing as if alive, echoing the creature's wrath. The ground beneath him turned to soft muck, each step growing heavier, pulling him down as shadows enveloped him, drowning him in a sea of darkness that seemed almost sentient. He gasped for air, but the weight only grew stronger, his heart pounding in desperation. Panic shot through him, and he fought against the spiraling tendrils, claws scraping against his skin. Then, just as despair threatened to pull him under, a rush of light burst within him, spilling forth like molten sun as he screamed with a voice fueled by all the love he refused to bury. "Begone!" The force of his words erupted through the clearing, ricocheting against the shadows, sending them reeling back as bursts of encapsulated brightness carved out paths through the encroaching darkness. "No!" The creature roared, caught off guard as his light surged forth, burning brighter than the midnight sky. Its form faltered again, twisting and turning as shards of shadow broke away like brittle glass, illuminating the remnants of what used to be. His heart raced as he pressed forward, each step seeking to gather the memories that felt tethered away, snatched back by the very hands of despair that sought to consume him. "Your suffering only strengthens me," it screamed in anguish, shadows rebounding, retaliating against the brilliance encroaching upon their domain. "Don't you understand? You cannot fight the dark. It is your true nature." But he would not back down, leaping forward, wielding those very memories like weapons against an overwhelming tide. "Then I will be the spark that ignites this darkness into flame." The shadows twisted into a grim visage, morphing into the shapes of friends and loved ones. Each twisted look, a mirror reflecting the deepest fears he had buried in the darkest corners of his heart. The warmth of memories intertwined with the coldness of despair, creating a storm of anguish that threatened to drown him once more. "Remember who you are." That voice echoed again, clearer now. It was the collective whispers of those he had lost, reminding him of love, of connection, of the strength found in vulnerability. Light surged, carrying him through the gloom as he embraced the memories, letting them illuminate the darkness around him, driving back the shadows that sought to bury him beneath sorrow once more. "Together, we will overcome this," he shouted, the words exploding from him as if trying to state a truth that had been lost to the ages. But the darkness would not relent. "You cannot silence the past," it hissed, anger pouring from its twisted frame as claws scraped against the light. "It will always be there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting to reclaim what's rightfully mine." The shadows coiled tighter around him, wrapping around his limbs like smothering vines, pulling him toward a despair that felt inevitable. Fear washed over him like a freezing wave, and for a brief moment he doubted. Was there a way out? Breath catching in his throat, he closed his eyes. Memories swirled around him, laughter mingling with sobs, faces both familiar and forgotten emerging to swim in the swirling darkness. He felt like he was drowning, collapsing under the weight of grief and sorrow, memories pouring over him like thick rain, saturating every pore. But then, deep within, he grasped the flicker of that initial radiance, searching for a beacon of hope amidst turmoil and anguish. "I am not my despair," he cried out, voice breaking through the veil as echoing warmth surged within his core, igniting the memories he clung to fiercely. "See the truth for what it is," he whispered. "This struggle is not fought within the confines of darkness. Together, we awaken, with every ounce of courage swirling within him." He ripped through the tendrils grasping at his heart, the light cascading around him, shattering the shadows, illuminating the figures that had haunted him so long. In an explosive burst, the shadows shrieked as a sudden brightness erupted through the forest, engulfing the darkness entirely until everything turned into a dreamy haze, a swirling motion of luminescence cutting through the enticement of despair. Yet as the shadows began to scatter, a sinister laughter rippled through the clearing, rolling like thunder, echoing against the towering trees. "Do you think yourself the victor? Just because you reclaim a moment? You will only find yourself deeper in the fog of regret," he faltered, a creeping dread twisting around his heart like ice. Remnants of pain lingered, coiling tighter as he could feel the struggle ahead. "You cannot diminish the love I carry," he implored, desperation lacing his voice. "You cannot escape your own darkness," it replied, venomously low, shadows swirling around it, feeding off fear that bubbled just beneath the surface. "You are what you fear, a pawn to your own sorrow." The creature's eyes gleamed, an echo of every worry he held dear, the doubts that scuttled beneath the haunting memories. Each claim sent a tremor of doubt through him, shadows growing thicker, twisting, molding themselves into faces of those he had lost, echoing with hurtful whispers. "Guilt surrounds you like a cloud, restricting what lies within," they murmured, each word digging into his heart like a dagger. "You were meant to protect us." "No!" he cried out, voice tearing through the smothering despair, heart racing anew as he pressed on. "I am not the grief of my past. I am the love we shared." But the shadows encroached ever closer, clawing at the edges of his resolve, silence stretching between them as the winds howled through the trees, wrapping around him like icy fingers. "You stand alone, bereft of belonging, and the darkness is patient. It waits, merely biding its time." The crushing weight of the creature's words settled upon him, and for a moment, the world fell silent, time suspended as he fought against the riptide of emotions that threatened to pull him under. Yet, even in that stillness, he felt the flickers of light dancing on the edges of despair, as ancient as the forest itself. Memories tethered to every heartbeat as laughter bubbled beneath the sorrow. Reminders that chaos was but a fleeting moment, not the final destination. Pushing through the dark, he held on to each joyous recollection, the scent of blooming flowers, laughter shared under starry skies, and warm embraces in the embrace of a loved one. He clung to them tightly. The shadows hissed as the memories surged around him, a protective wall of light pressing against the encroaching darkness. "Do not hide behind such fragile dreams," the creature shrieked, its voice slithering through the air, cold and piercing as a winter wind. "Those memories will shatter like glass, and I shall be there to pick up the pieces." He felt the roots of fear digging into him again, a tangible shiver creeping across his skin as if the very ground resonated with a chilling pulse. The trees loomed overhead, their gnarled branches twisting as if animated by an unseen force, whispering secrets of despair to one another. Shadows slipped between the trees, forming into figures that eerily mirrored those he had lost. Their faces were distorted, mouths moving in silent screams, stretching into grotesque, accusatory expressions that churned his stomach. "Why did you not save us?" they wailed, their voices merging into a chorus of anguish, echoing through the clearing. "You left us in the dark." No. He felt as if the earth itself were sinking beneath his feet. "You were never alone. I did everything I could." Desperation clawed at his throat. "I shared my light with you. Your light is but a flicker," the creature countered, drawing closer, the shadows weaving tighter around him. He saw its form shifting, now vaguely human, now something else entirely, limbs elongating, features obscured. It was a creature born of fears, morphing with the twisting shadows, and it drew closer until he could feel the chill of its breath against his skin. A sudden burst of panic ignited in his chest as he stumbled back, the spectral figures swirling around him like a suffocating mist. "You feel it, don't you?" it taunted. "The gnawing realization that you're the architect of your own suffering? The darkness. It knows you inside out." The shadows pressed in tighter, and he felt the weight of the night closing around him. Memories flickered urgently, a kaleidoscopic blur of laughter, warmth, and love intertwining with sorrow, the loss of those moments heavier than stone. He could not breathe. As he fought against their grasp, he felt their chilling fingers against him, pulling him into the depths of memories he wished to forget, each one a dagger burying deeper into his resolve. "Face us!" they screamed in unison, their voices harrowing and cold, floating to him like specters on an icy wind. "You cannot banish what dwells in your heart." He stumbled, gasping for air, lungs constricted as fragments of buried grief broke free. A shuddering breath filled him, bringing forth the weight of their loss. "No, this isn't real," he shouted, but doubt seeped into his mind like poison, as each familiar face twisted into one of sorrow or fear, haunting him. "Come, join us in oblivion." The creature beckoned, shadowy tendrils curling closer, wrapping around him like chains, pulling him into a chasm of darkness. He felt himself slipping, the very essence of light within him consumed by the palpable rage radiating from the entity. Together, in darkness, it hissed, a glimmer of triumph threading through its voice, and suddenly the ground below him felt as if it were receding, dragging him down into a cold abyss. He clawed at the ground, fighting against the inexorable pull, the weight of despair dragging him deeper and deeper into the oblivion. "I won't let you take me," he cried out, his voice breaking, desperation crashing over him like a wave. Suddenly, a memory broke through the fog, a sunrise after a storm, pure and wide, its rays of light breaking through the clouds like a promise. He held on to it tightly, pulling against the icy grasp of the shadows, summoning warmth and light. "This is not the end," he shouted. "I choose to carry the light of those I've lost, not their shadows." The darkness recoiled at his defiance, shrieking as the memories exploded from him, swirling into a brilliant vortex of light that pushed back against the veil of shadows. The forest seemed to tremble as the creatures twisted violently, screeches reverberating through the air like knives slicing into the fabric of reality. But even as he fought, he felt the creature's presence loom larger than before, the shifting shadows coiling around him in a familiar, suffocating embrace, their whispers brushing against him like the touch of ice. "Your strength is nothing but a fleeting dream," it crooned, amusement dancing in its words. "A candle in the vast darkness. What good will it do against the storm that weaves through your existence?" "No!" he shouted back, fierceness rising within him like a surge of electricity, flaring through his body with intent. "I am more than mere dreams. I am a testament to every moment shared, every laugh, every tear." With renewed vigor, he summoned the memories again, grasping for the very essence of what lingered within them, the deep-rooted feelings and shining connections, fiercely bright in the face of despair. As the light burst forth, illuminating the shadows, he felt warmth radiating from every corner of his heart. Memories unfolded like petals of light, enveloping him in cocooning warmth. The shadows screamed as they thrashed about, unable to withstand the brilliance radiating from within him. But there was no dignity in their screams. There was only darkness descending, bringing tidal waves of despair that threatened to drown him once more. It was intoxicating, a silence creeping in, echoing through the twilight as he was gripped by grief's familiar hand. "You cannot hold back the flood," the creature purred, luring him with its serpentine voice. "You will always drown in the deep." He shook his head, feeling the cracks beneath him begin to split, littered with remnants of all he had lost. "If I drown, I'll take you down with me." Churning emotions threatened to overwhelm him, but he would not let anguish win. He would fight until his last breath. A wave of memories crashed in, their laughter rising as the silhouette of a joyful past painted fleeting images in vivid strokes against the encroaching darkness. Every beautiful moment forged like fire coursed through his veins. "You are not my end," he yelled, voice breaking through the din, resonating until he felt the air vibrate around him. Feeling strength building, he raised his hands, focusing on the memories that had ignited his spirit. Light burst forth from him, illuminating the clearing as if the dawn were breaking within him. The shadows shrieked again, retreating under the intensity of his defiance, their forms flickering like candle flames in wind, gradually fraying at the edges like shredded paper. "You think light will hold against the inevitable." The creature lunged, ferocious and unfazed, clawing its way back into shape. "You're a coward, running away from the truth." It lunged forward, closing the gap with a leap that seemed to stretch forever. "Face me!" The words flowed through him like a river of fierce intent. "I will not hide. Not anymore." The shadows paused, a moment where the world held its breath as if waiting for a clash of the titans. The forest seemed frozen in place, a tense silence wrapping around them. The memories danced tumultuously in his heart, every flicker carrying whispers from those he loved, calling him back, urging him onward. He took a step forward, breathing heavy but steady. "I embrace you. I welcome every joy and every sorrow with open arms." With a force of what he didn't know he had, he thrust his arms forward as a shimmering light erupted from his core, exploding outward in a dazzling display of colors and warmth, enveloping the clearing like a golden cocoon. The light burst with a sharp intensity, forcing the shadows back, illuminating even the deepest recesses of despair. "Your light cannot extinguish the truth," the creature howled, but there was fear now, fear that echoed through the chilling recess of its voice. The darkness twisted and contorted as tendrils of light coiled around it, flaring with brightness, desperation rising. It jabbed forward, claw-like hands reaching out toward him. "You cannot hide from pain." "I do not hide," he shouted back, holding the light firm and radiating hope. "Pain is part of the journey. It is through pain we find joy and love, and everything worth living for." Before him, colors exploded in vibrant arrays, filling the space with ethereal light and beauty as if the world itself rejoiced in that declaration. The shadows raged against the brilliance, and the ground beneath him trembled violently. But he stood firm, drawing on the very essence of who he was, a flicker against the onslaught of chaos. "No more," he bellowed, every ounce of conviction roiling in his heart, light engulfing him fully, raking through the suffocating despair. This was the moment he had waited for, and now, as he pushed against the darkness, he garnered every memory shared with those he had lost, unearthing the deepest parts of himself. The laughter, the tears, the hugs, and whispered fears, all woven tightly into the intricate tapestry of love that pulsed within him. As the shadows howled, he felt himself root deeper, grasping the very essence of all that had come before, resolutely pushing against the darkness with its memories attached, shining even brighter. "You are powerless to stop me," the creature screamed in a rage, but it was growing frantic, shadows snapping and flickering under the relentless brightness. He pressed on, feeling the connection between him and those he loved, a bond like blood streaming through the richness of the earth itself. With a roar that shook the heavens and split the darkness, he summoned forth the light of transcendent memories, radiating waves cascading outward, breaking apart the malignancy that sought to consume him. The creature screeched again, violent forms twisting and collapsing under the weight of illuminating power, as light engulfed the shadows, revealing their true nature, breaking them apart like thin ice underfoot. No! It cried again, barely holding its form as despair seeped from its essence. You think you can win this? It's not over until I say it is. The only way you're leaving is into the light, he exclaimed, boldness rooted deep in his heart, as he thrust his arms forward into the tempest, engulfing it with brilliance that shot forth like a lance, sharp and true. Shadows twisted wildly, the creature howling in anguish, thrashing as the light delved deep, pulling apart the threads of sorrow, illuminating the truth buried within. A fragile gleam erupted in that darkness, a flicker of recognition and clarity as the very core despair began to crack, revealing layers of long-buried pain. He breathed heavily, a primal energy thrumming within him as he chose to embrace the pain he carried. Every gasp felt woven with fragments of a joyful past, a moment of laughter shared, a warm hand clasped tight at dusk, and in that embrace, he could feel the weight of love so immense it swirled around him, radiating hope and determination. No one is lost, he shouted, voice echoing through the clearing, breaking against the howls of shadows. Not while I carry the light of their love, the colors illuminated, fierce and undeniable, and with every heartbeat, the shadows began to retreat further and further, whipping like specters in the wind. The clearing glowed with a soft, golden hue, illuminated by the warmth of his memories and the fierce determination to shine in the encroaching dark. A sudden gust of wind howled through the trees, sweeping up the shadows and scattering them like autumn leaves, frantically retreating from the brilliance that held the center. Yet even as the light surged forth, he felt the weight of the creature looming, still fierce in its resolve. This is merely the beginning. You think yourself a conqueror, but I shall live within you. Waves of desperation threatened to wash over him as icy fingers coiled around his heart again, constricting tighter, but he pushed against it, breathing in memories, love, laughter, moments of joy blending into strength that surged through him. You will not claim me, he shouted, but echoes of the creature's promised darkness began to swirl ominously about him, like a smothering mist, wrapping around every flicker of hope. You will forever live where I cannot reach. No, he screamed, voice echoing in the fading light. You are not my keeper. You will not be my truth. Desperation flooded the clearing. Shadows rushed in wild abandon as defiance surged through him, propelling him forward. The light flickered within him, expanding as he sent waves of radiant memories forth, crashing against the chaos head-on, determined to pierce the heart of darkness. The creature dove within him, shadow and sorrow wrapping around his essence, seeking to smother the very fabric of what he carried. But he could feel the warmth of love pushing back, pulsing in time with his heart, a relentless beacon against the encroaching despair. Remember who you are. The words rose from deep within, igniting embers of courage that had been dormant for too long. You are the love, the laughter, the very essence of resilience. He grasped tight onto the flickers of strength, pushing the light forth as if to drive back the fear, unleashing a torrent of memories entwined deeply in the fabric of his being. In the storm, shadows twitched violently, and the creature reared back, caught in a whirlwind of anguish. You cannot break. He felt a chill seep into his bones as shadows thickened around him, wrapping tighter like a noose, clawing at his heart. Dread unfurled its icy fingers in the pit of his stomach, urging him to falter, to give in. He could almost hear the past echoing in whispers as the darkness layered thick with doubts. Just a little longer. The creature's voice slithered through the frigid air, its tone a maddening taunt that pricked at the edges of his resolve. Let me take your light. Let me ease your burden. You don't have to fight. Images morphed in the recesses of his mind, ghostly faces emerging, their features twisted in sorrow, fading to shadows. Friends lost to time, laughter foreboding in the air like a haunting memory. You carry their burdens now, the voice purred. Each laugh is a cry, each smile a mask. You're alone, surrounded by echoes that will never return. He clutched his head, despite internally screaming that he wasn't alone. A tangible weight pressed down on him, the shadows thickening until he could hardly breathe through the suffocating darkness. Fear flickered in his eye, a shimmer in the depths of hopelessness. "No!" he shouted, a painful gnash of steel against stone, voice raw from power. "You have no hold over me. I own my pain. You do not." With every ounce of strength he could summon, he envisioned the light as a shield, a barrier between him and the creature lurking within the thick pool of despair threatening to consume him whole. "Foolish boy," it hissed, a low growl rumbling within tender tendrils of shadow. "The light only reveals what you fear. It will not protect you." In the flickering glow, he felt a shiver run through him, a spine-chilling recognition filling the hollows of his soul, a truth that clawed at the edges of his consciousness. The air grew heavier, thickening into a serpent-like grip as scenarios floated through him unbidden, shadows looming large with his regrets, images of roads not taken, words left unspoken, faces beloved, twisted into contorted agonies, revealing the pain he had tried so desperately to bury. His heart raced as the darkness coiled tighter, forcing his knees to buckle against the unrelenting weight. "I cannot allow you to win," he gasped, voice cracking, pulse thundering like a war drum in the periphery of his mind. "I will not let you define me." Yet with each syllable, the shadows twisted deeper, gnashing whispers clawing at rationality, engulfing him within an abyss of relentless dread. The creature's laughter inched closer, sharp as razors in the stillness. "Do you hear them?" it taunted, each syllable wrapping around him like chains. "The doubts, the blame, the echoes of your lost loved ones? They want you to weep. They want you to feel helpless." Suddenly, suffocating memories rushed in unbidden, fresh grief flooding through him like a tide but more merciless. Lost voices began rising around him, forming a cacophony of sorrow, each corresponding face withering into spectral blurs of cryptic longing painted in vibrant grief. "Remember their tears," the creature hissed softly near his ear, a whisper that grazed his consciousness like a feather. "Each sob, another piece of you cracked and bleeding. You cannot escape it. You are forever tethered to despair." Gripped by terror, he staggered, breath hitching. Shadows lunged forward, snatching at his limbs as he fought, pools of darkness lapping at his resolve while memories battled to rise. "Why do you struggle?" The voice dripped with venomous allure. "Embrace it. You belong to this dark, not the light. You are separated, a ghost among the living." "No!" he screamed, desperation clawing at his throat as he continued to push against the clutches of the shadows. "I belong with them. Each moment holds light. They are part of my heart, fuels that drive me forward." But the darkness only thickened, swirling ominously like storm clouds coalescing into a tempest. Images danced before his eyes, his mother, father kissing him goodnight, and the sound of laughter drifting through sunlit rooms. Those memories paired against the agony, the sound of quiet sobs, the shattering silence after their passing. "Take your pain," the creature growled, shadows swirling like storm winds. "Let it descend upon you, become a part of you, inevitable and eternal." "And oh," he bellowed, thrusting his arms forward and summoning every shining fragment of memory, letting their warmth thaw the chill creeping through his veins. "They taught me to fight. They are my guiding stars through every dark horizon." Yet, encroaching anguish bore down violently. The shadows started to reform, monsters looming larger, specters of every regret near his heart. "You're only prolonging the inevitable," the creature whispered, hissing breath choking the air with dark promises. "This is your destiny. You cannot extinguish the darkness within." Battling the encroaching dread, he gasped, lunging forward, feeling the heat from the memories pulsing and shoving against the grief-driven shadows. He could almost hear their voices, reassuring and vibrant, his closest friends urging him on, breathing warmth against the choking despair. "Remember who you are," they whispered as if from the ether, filling his resolve with raw brightness. The air crackled, lighting a frigid path ahead, a tunnel of shimmering light tracing through thick shadows, trying to engulf him alive. "I am not afraid," he shouted, voice reverberating and sharp against the oppressive aura, and as illumination burst forth from him, shadows shrank back and shrieked like banshees caught in the winds. Face it, boy, they'd hate seeing you suffer. The creature twisted its form, grotesque hands reaching forward, drawing closer as if wanting to absorb him from the glowing warmth surrounding him. No, they would want me to thrive, he roared back, feeling the pulse of ancient memories enveloping him in waves. Echoes of hands held tightly amid a storm. They thrive with me. Their love shields me from your grasp. Enraged, the creature surged forward, a shadowy beast filled with claws and teeth that shrieked like banshees in the wind, contorting and twisting, wrapping back into itself like a snake. You think love will save you? Love only binds you to the earth. How long before you drown in this illusion? It is not an illusion. He fought against the relentless darkness thrumming against him, stitching together memories, pulling light from shadows like threads woven into a tapestry of fierce reminder. He envisioned each loved one vividly, knowing they would fight beside him now, even in silence, seated in his heart. Around him, the shadows hissed, swirling in desperate frenzy as their form coiled tightly, an entity of whirlwind despair. He felt a desperate urge now, an electric hum rising as he fueled the moment, summoning strength from the depths of grief, transforming it into unwavering resolve. Listen, he shouted, rushing forward against the whirlpools of inky fury. They only bind me to joy, and I will carry their love wherever I go. I will fight. I will thrive. As if responding to his call, luminous tendrils of light erupted from the core of his being, pushing against the looming despair. Brilliant colors exploded in fiery shards, illuminating the shadows as blinding radiance pierced through the dark dominion. You think brightness will stop me? The creature's voice trembled with malice, but it faltered, for the tendrils surged outward, a tidal wave crashing against black, devouring its form as memories burned like stars igniting the sky. He could feel every moment, a synchronous heartbeat resonating throughout him, a chorus of warmth shielding vulnerability, an army of whispers from those cherished filling every heartache. Together, he declared, voice growing steadier, echoing with strength. Together, we shine bright. You cannot extinguish light born of love. Fierce waves of warmth surged forth, embracing him, empowering him as shadows shrieked and retreated, sparked by the brilliance expanding outward. The creature writhed and faltered, trapped within the searing radiance that flooded the glade, fragments of itself flickering, trying desperately to reform but failing time and again. This is not the end, it screamed, voice escaping into silence. You will never forget this. Somewhere within the shards of shadows, he felt a sense of horror pulse against his heart like distant thunder. It was agony he could not ignore, a truth all too real, yet still, warmth swelled past the pain. He held tight to it, holding each love, each moment, every whispered promise against the suffocating chill of despair. No! He cried harder, voice a growing storm. You cannot take this from me. You do not win this battle. Tendrils of light spiraled around him, enveloping him until shadows fell silent, coiling back against the edges of existence. The dark form began to fracture and shatter, crashing down like rain, pieces scattering upon the ground until nothing but dust and echoes remained, fading within the caress of dawn. Yet still, the creature's voice lingered, like a lingering shadow dancing just beyond the light. I will return for you. I weave through your mind. I am part of you. He gasped but pressed forward, pushing stronger into the warm embrace, holding on to each memory glimmering brightly against despair that sought to claw within. The remnants of darkness lingered, always threatening to creep back, seeking to darken moments of indecision, lurking where light would dare not tread. Fear not, the voices whispered again, wrapping gently around him like an embrace. You are never alone, but with each heartbeat, he could feel the shadow of despair lurking, an ever-present reminder dancing just beyond his senses. The air grew heavy again, thickening with a chill that seeped into the core of his soul, a reminder the battle that would not cease. You fought well today. The shadow trilled within the dark echoes of its voice, simmering with malicious mirth. But victory is fleeting. You will always succumb to the darkness waiting in the corners. You will remember the pain. He gritted his teeth, determination surging as he drew forth brighter memories. The warmth of laughter against stormy nights, starlit skies cradled by kindred spirits. He propelled them forward, chasing the darkness with radiance. Your words may haunt me, he countered. Feeling warmth rushed through him as a shield against the piercing cold. But love remains. I will not forget. Each memory ratchets up strength. I embrace it. The shadows recoiled, swirling tighter in frenzied chaos as his vibrant energy surged within. The light washed away despair, illuminating the corners where darkness sought refuge, forcing it to retreat. No! The creature snarled, breaking the fragile silence, its voice twisting into howling madness. You must feel the emptiness. You must recognize the grief that lives within your heart. The air seemed to swell, tendrils of sorrow clawing at him, enveloping him with crisp tendrils, reeling them through memories. Faces he had loved shrouded in mist, and pain spiraled through the fog, a haze that left only a bittersweet ache. Do it! The creature screamed, forming like an ancient beast, drawing energy from the void. Relinquish your light, and I will grant you peace. The frigid hands pulled tighter, squeezing his heart against the swell of panic. But at that moment he pushed forward, throwing bright memories against the suffocating storm, light sparking through darkness, shattering despair like glass. I will wield my pain, my suffering. Each heartbeat surged with vibrancy, illuminating the sepulchral chill, transforming shadows into a sparkling dance of possibility. I am not broken. As strength surged forth, colors shattered the muted darkness, illuminating the ever-looming fear of mortality that tried so fiercely to seize his spirit. He was not alone. He was embraced by the love of countless souls woven into the very core of him, surging like a ceaseless tide. See, he shouted into the void, fighting against clawing shadows, feeling resilience simmer and erupt in fiery waves. You cannot claim me. I refuse to relinquish the light that thrives within, holding fierce against the weight of your darkness. The creature twisted, thrashing against that very declaration, an embodiment of fury and despair. You think you won this? You are tethered to shadows forever. Yet, as the creature lunged, its darkness splintering against the encroaching warmth radiating like a sun just beyond the horizon, he stood firm. Time seemed to stretch as colors burst forth, weaving a tapestry of radiant memories. Twinkling stars of laughter, moments of shared vulnerability and strength. Do not cower, he intoned, feeling love pulse through him anew. Each memory becomes a part of me. It fuels my fight. Cracks erupted through the darkness as the shadows twisted violently, seeking to reclaim control. But he pushed harder, breaking through barriers layered against silence. The cacophony transformed as laughter broke cold air, sweet and ephemeral, filling his heart with every cherished memory. A visceral warmth radiated within him, illuminating the void surrounding, illuminating the encroaching shadows as they writhed and twisted against brilliant light. Join me, he roared back, drawing the forest closer, the brightness pushing ever deeper, each pulse resonating, stronger, more vibrant. Shadows burst against the luminous tendrils, flare and glare, shrinking deep into the night until they meld. As he seized control of the radiant thread surrounding him, the shadows recoiled, yet their whispers seeped into his mind, clawing at the cracks of his resolve. Darkness slithered, thick and liquid, skimming across the ground like a predator testing its territory. He could feel the fear claw at his heart, an insistent gnawing that suggested the shadows could rise again. Suddenly, tendrils of shadows shot forth, wrapping around his legs, cold and clammy, seeking to drag him down into their abyss. The weight enveloped him and he stumbled, heart racing against the encroaching dread. Muscles tightening, he fought against them, lighting up his memories like a beacon through the swirling fog. He could hear the raspy laughter of the creature echoing in his ears, a chilling reminder that he was not yet free. "You think you can escape?" The shadows taunted in a myriad of voices, shifting from whispers to howls, a cacophony of agony that clawed at the edges of his sanity. "You are forever bound to us. Your joy is fleeting. Your triumph, a mere illusion." With every heartbeat, he pushed past the chill, each pulse igniting warmth that flared against despair's grasp. The shadows recoiled but lurked just beyond his reach, a thrumming pulse of darkness that promised endless torment. "Let me show you." The creature's voice transitioned into something deeper, resonating from the void around him, a storm of malevolence stepping forward. "Let me show you the truth of this endless cycle." The air thickened, a dense smothering veil where light struggled for existence. Shadows darted forward, crafting images of ill-fated moments. Each regret he dared to forget flared into existence. The faces of lost loved ones twisted in torment, bitter reminders of failure, gaping wounds of grief that clawed mercilessly at his heart. Familiar voices wailed lamentations, echoes of those he had lost. Carla, her gentle tone now laced with sorrow, begged, "Why did you let me go?" The weight of remorse pressed against him, nearly suffocating, pulling him down into the shadowy depths that threatened to consume his very essence. "No, Carla," he screamed, urgency weighing heavily in his chest. "You are still with me. I can feel you, with me in my heart." But the darkness merely snickered, enveloping him in a suffocating embrace, drawing him deeper into the whirlwind of despair. "Can you truly? Remember the night you stood by as the light faded from my eyes?" Carla's voice hollowed out, morphed into an echoing abyss, dragging him further into a pit of despair that begged to swallow him whole. He stumbled, grappling with the pain clinging like a shroud, fists clenched in resolve. "Your love, our memories, keep me alive." He forced the warmth to flood through him, knowing the truth of those moments rooted in love could not be extinguished. Suddenly, fleeting images of sunshine and laughter emerged around him, a celebration unmarred by shadows, the kind of joy that felt like home. "I hold on to those memories, Carla. I carry them with me." The shadows wavered, screeching in fury, their grotesque forms contorting in fits of rage. In the midst of their chaos, he found strength. He darted forward into the ever-thickening fog of darkness, lighting his path with vivid memories that flared hot against the cold. Yet, despair reformed quickly, twisting the glade into an eerie scene. Trees bent at unnatural angles, their gnarled limbs stretching towards him like the hands of the lost, reaching out begging for recognition. The whispers transformed into chants, resonating like a dirge through the frozen air, taunting and echoing his fears. "Join us in the void," they beckoned, voices combining into a horrendous symphony of despair that seeped deep into his bones, sending shivers cascading through him. All you need to do is relent. Embrace your sorrow. Just beyond, shadows morphed and manifested in grotesque shapes, forming eyes from darkness that glared with insatiable hunger. He could feel their malevolence, tendrils creeping closer, a tangible pull urging him to surrender. "No!" he shouted defiantly, forcing the light to pulse brighter, illuminating fragments of joy that flickered like neglected stars breaking through the murk. "I won't yield. You don't own me. I am more than my pain." The shadows rippled in anger, and suddenly, the ground beneath him writhed, shifting like quicksand. The trees twisted, their roots extending like monstrous hands trying to entrap him, dragging him into the writhing earth. He stumbled backward, heart racing as they clawed closer. Desperation surged within him. Memories of warmth flooded his mind. He envisioned his friends, their faces alive with kindness, remnants of laughter battling bravely against the tide of darkness. "I carry their light," he declared, feeling energy ignite within him anew. With a surge of defiance, he raised his arms, channels of powerful light shooting forth with unwavering force, breaking through the grip of shadowy tendrils, scattering them like wisps of smoke. The darkness shrieked, a tumultuous sound that echoed through the glade. And for a moment, silence chased away despair. But then, a cacophony of anger erupted. The shadows swirling wildly, anger pouring forth like a storm. A sudden surge of darkness lunged back at him, eyes glowing, a monstrous grin forming upon wretched faces. You cannot escape what you are. Eyes widened in horror as the shadows morphed again, contorting into shapes he recognized. The grotesque forms became twisted reflections of those he had loved, faces frozen in agony, their haunted expressions merciless and far too familiar. "Look at us! Face the truth!" they cried, reaching out toward him like ghoulish specters, limbs stretching with longing, shadows swirling around his legs. "You think you can live without regret? We are part of you. Embrace us." Rage ignited within him, scorching away the fear, banishing doubt. "No, you are not my truth," he roared, pouring every ounce of strength into the light within. He would not let them claim him, the flicker of warmth reminding him of all he had survived. Pathetic, the echoes hissed, the darkness swirling tighter, forming a suffocating blanket around him as he gripped the light tighter. "You are fragile, broken by loss. You cannot escape your nightmares. You must feel our pain." Frigid fingers wrapped around his throat, choking, clawing, a grip of terror that threatened to extinguish his spirit. He gasped, pulling at the air, but deep within, he ignited a spark, a fire that drove away the relentless chill. "Let go of me," he shouted defiantly, forcing memories to circle like stars around him, igniting in waves, each spark breathing life against the cold, against the darkness drawing ever closer. The shadows twisted again, surging forward like a tidal wave. He felt the weight pressing ever more, an avalanche of grief swirling desperately around him, threatening to drown him under its suffocating grip. "Join the void," they screamed, pleading, the shadows taking on the tortured forms of his past. They taunted him, wailing in desperation for his acknowledgement. Each regret a haunting song, a heartbeat of anguish that reverberated against his very soul. "And oh," he cried, echoing his defiance against the chorus of wailing shadows, "I will not become a vessel of regret. I am stronger than my sorrow." Light exploded around him, born from the essence of his fighting spirit, a warm wave that billowed ever outward, a radiant ripple against the entangling darkness. He felt the shadows recoil momentarily, halted as a blinding illumination surged forth, transforming despair into shimmering brilliance. Yet, just as quickly, the shadows amalgamated, shifting into monstrous forms that taunted him from the periphery, their essence a swirl of agony and loss, seeking to snare him once again into their merciless tides. "You believe you're free?" The darkness lingers, their voices hissed, unrelenting and cruel. A spectral figure rose among them, its eyes glowing a deep void, a cruel smile distorting its meaning. "You cannot erase what you've lost. It will always follow you." Feeling every pulse of dread clamor for attention, he focused anew, brightening the light within, drawing upon every loving moment that beckoned fiercely against despair. "You are wrong," he shouted, each word sending waves of defiance crashing against their corrupted forms. "You have no power over me. I choose hope, and love guides me ever onward." The shadows wavered, flinching at his defiance as cracks formed in their monstrous facade. Shimmering light climbed like vines through their grotesque shapes, catching glimmers of warmth that resisted their onslaught. "Your strength is an illusion," they sneered, a haunting laughter rising in the air before surrounding him, threatening to block out the glow of hope. "We will ensnare you, remind you of your failures." The twisted figures started to fuse and mold into the faces of his loved ones, their inscriptions of anguish becoming a relentless storm against his strength. "Why did you abandon me?" they cried, voices merging into one haunting lament that threatened to drown him. "You carry the brunt of our loss. Feel it. Relive it." Terror gripped him anew, but he pushed against the weight, locking eyes with their spectral forms, rage boiling within. "I will not drown in despair. You are parts of who I love, but you do not define me." With that declaration, he surged forward, tendrils of brilliance clawing forth, illuminating the dark tapestry woven among the heavens. He felt the pulsing warmth of every soul he cherished. Each glance shot energy through him, every heartbeat igniting light against shadows encroaching, battling back against despair that promised only darkness. "Leave me alone," he thundered, feeling each pulse of strength adding to the illuminating tide rising against the beastly nightmares. The figures howled, writhing in never-ending darkness, but he would not relent. The luminous energy bloomed, scattering cries of anguish back into starlight, each step fueled by the fierce memories racing through his veins, drenched in laughter and love that resurfaced with a storm of insistence. With a final push, the warmth expanded, bursting forth into the void that surrounded, a churning wave of color born from love digging deep into his heart. The shadows screamed, shrieked in agony as they exploded into fragments of smoke, scattering and dissolving under the fierce glow. But in the echoes, the creature roared, an undercurrent of its malevolence threatening to surface. "This is not over. You cannot escape your heart's sorrow." The darkness flickered and dimmed, yet the remnants still clung tenaciously, swirling ominously near the periphery. In that moment, amid the tumult of fear and fury, he felt the burden of memories swell within him. Despair lingered like a distant storm, yet as he breathed, he welcomed the warmth that exposed glimmers of hope. Each beat of his heart aligned with the ripples of memories shouted in resistance, illuminating the very path forward. Fighting through the remnants of shadows, he pressed deeper into the brilliance swirling around him. The forest shifted and transformed, revealing a labyrinth of possibilities forged from love, a sanctuary of warmth encompassing the chaotic energy flowing from the tendrils kissed by light. "Together we are strong," he declared, feeling their presence trail alongside him. The starlight reflected on endless pathways, glistening with potential, a kaleidoscope where emotions surged ahead, spiraling from warmth and joy devouring the coldness ahead. As shadows loomed, he found solace knowing he carried every fragment of love within him, ready to shine brightly against whatever darkness awaited. "Let me show you the bond of love," he shouted toward the shadows swirling around him, channeling memories into radiant streams that surged forth like fireflies through the night. But as he pressed deeper into the glade, seeking paths with wonder and hope, he felt the darkness begin to gather once more, thick clouds of sorrow pooling relentlessly, threatening to crawl back into existence. "You think you won? Foolish boy." A voice snarled as dark forms began to coalesce again, their twisted limbs reaching to ensnare him once more. "You are not free. You will always be haunted by your pain." In terror, he spun around as the shadows lunged, their icy tendrils racing to reclaim him. Panic surged within, but he took a deep breath and steadied himself. He refused. Each memory, each joyous moment shifted the tide, fighting unyieldingly against the cold grasp of despair. "No!" he bellowed, feeling veins surge with radiant energy. "You cannot take me." With a surge of power, he invoked every memory, every instance of love illuminating the air, a force so bright it broke through every shadow that loomed ahead. He thrust his hands forward and hurled a barrage of brilliant light, scattered through the engulfing darkness. The shadows cried out in fury, twisting and contorting as bright sparks chased them into corners where lament could not suppress the truth offered by illumination. Triumph surged as the echo of laughter threaded through the glade, his friends, joining the warm embrace of memory, clawing against the oppressive cold, fighting alongside him, transcending time and space, scattered within the fabric of the night. "Remember, we are not alone." Fierce energy radiated forward, swells of warmth pushing against shadows that writhed, convulsing with ancient menace. The air around him grew thick with an unnatural chill, the shadows swirling with renewed vigor, their bitter laughter echoing like 1,000 mournful whispers. Tendrils slithered across the ground, reaching for him with a ghastly hunger. Each moment felt heavy, suffocating, laden with shadows that threatened to crush both body and spirit. The luminous memories he conjured shimmered weakly against the onslaught. As he stood resolute, fragments of light flickered around him, still striving to illuminate the encroaching darkness. Yet the oppressive void clawed at the edges of his consciousness, gnashing its teeth like a ravenous beast eager to consume him whole. "Remember the pain," they jeered, their voices merging into a dissonant chorus. "You can't escape us." With a surge of defiance, he retreated a few steps, the very ground beneath him trembling as the shadows advanced. Fear pricked at him, a wicked, biting sensation that threatened to paralyze every fiber of his being. The air felt heavy with despair, each breath becoming a challenge, as if he were inhaling shards of ice. Suddenly, from the swirling mass, he could discern figures forming, grotesque and familiar. Faces twisted in agony, mouths stretched into horrendous, silent screams. Memories of those he had lost surged forth, morphing into haunting apparitions. "Join us," they cried, their voices blending into a melody of anguish and longing, an ethereal call that tugged at his heartstrings. "You are one of us. You belong in the shadows." "No!" he shouted, clenching his fists, feeling the warmth of light surround him like a protective shell. But the shadows pressed closer, a tide of grief and immortality that sought to pull him under, to drown him in the abyss of despair. A shadow surged forward, sharper than the others, a nightmarish visage that bore down on him like a predator focused on its prey. Its eyes, dark and hollow, pierced through his soul, reflecting every regret, every failure, every moment of weakness. It seemed to embody all he feared most, its presence an echo of every mistake replaying in his mind. "Face your truth," it hissed, its voice a serpent's whisper laced with venom, slithering into his ears, coiling around his thoughts. "You are not the hero. You are the coward who fled, who abandoned those who needed you. Can you remain strong when you know the truth?" Panic surged, and the very ground beneath him began to tremble again, quaking with the weight of his fears. Desperation clawed at his heart as he fell backward, fear threatening to overcome the light he fought to embrace. The wails of the shadows coalesced into a cacophony that reverberated in his mind, each note a piercing reminder of vulnerability. But with every ounce of will, he pulled himself upright, channeling the warmth that surged around him like a blazing inferno. "I will not falter," he shouted defiantly, thrusting his hands against the shadows gathering mercilessly around him. "You do not hold power over me." The shadows screamed in dissent, a mixture of rage and fear as waves of light crushed against their dark forms. They writhed, convulsing like serpents caught in a storm, but the menace lingered, twisting once again into images of loss. Friends lost forever, faces he had once seen laughing now marred with tears, eyes wide with betrayal and agony. Each visage acted like daggers stabbing his heart, relentless in their pursuit to break his spirit. "You are alone," the shadows shrieked, their voices overlapping in a disjointed choir of despair. "Every memory is a chain. You will always remember what you've lost. We are your past. You cannot sever the bond." He felt his stomach drop, a sickening weight anchoring him to the ground, and for an agonizing moment, doubt clawed its way into his thoughts, curling around him like a serpent, suffocating and persistent. The icy grasp threatened to pull him down into their depths, where anguish and sorrow awaited to devour every flicker of hope. As he struggled to breathe, the light within flickered like a dying star. The air smelled of brimstone, darkness swirling around him like storm clouds gathering for an impending tempest. But then he remembered her laugh, the sweet, melodic sound that echoed through his memories. He pictured her embrace, the warmth of sunlight spilling through a doorway, the feeling of joy that filled his heart in her presence. "Take that away from me, and you take my soul," he bellowed, reigniting the flame within. The light surged forth, a brilliant explosion that pushed back the gathering darkness. Shadows recoiled, twisting, their forms flailing and distorted as they struggled against the assault. "You think memories can save you? They are shackles, binding you to pain," they snarled, rage filling their guttural tones as they charged again, storming forth like an avalanche, a surge of dark energy sweeping through the air, a tempest of sorrow that threatened to drown out the very essence of hope. But he stood his ground, legs planted firm against the indiscriminate force of despair pulling at him. "You will not claim me. I am not your servant." With every heartbeat, he fed the light, glimmers of hope cascading outwards in radiant waves, a lighthouse shining through the darkness. Yet even as he fought, shadows like smoke slipped through the cracks in his resolve, whispers slithering into his mind. Fearful visions bloomed, phantoms taunting him, their anguished faces twisting into horrifying masks of sorrow. "Just give in, embrace the abyss. There is no escape from your heartache." He thought of how many times he had succumbed to his fears, how he had longed to forget, to escape the memories that invaded his dreams, each repressed emotion boiling to the surface. "Don't listen," he shouted, shaking his head violently as if trying to dislodge their terrible words. "You're nothing but echoes. I will not yield to you." The shadows roared in response, rage swelling as they bared down on him, relentless and vicious, clawing through the air, sharp tendrils wrapping like chains around his legs. The icy chill seeped into his bones, stealing warmth and light as it threatened to pull him into the void once and for all. A chilling reminder that every spark of hope could be extinguished with a single, cold touch. "You cannot escape the truth," they shrieked, the ground rumbling with their ominous presence as they tightened their grip. "This is your fate. You will join us in eternal darkness." The specters lunged toward him, a mass of shadow and hatred swallowing the fragile light he fought to maintain. Pain erupted in his chest, and he felt his thoughts spiral into darkness, the shadows wrapping around him as if to absorb the very essence of his spirit. Then came the laughter, a chilling sound that echoed in the air, ringing through the trees, clawing at the edges of his sanity. The shadows shifted, swirling around him like a tempest, reshaping seconds into lifetimes of agony. Vengeful eyes stared from the dark, hollow and filled with malice, beckoning him to join them in the chaos. "Does it hurt?" One voice, smooth and sinister, whispered, edging closer as the figures morphed into familiar shapes. "You left us. You chose them over us." His heart pounded sickeningly, dread pooling in his stomach as he recognized the face haunting him. A friend, eyes filled with accusations, a specter of betrayal. "You could have saved us. Look at us now." "No!" he screamed, arms raised in defiance, even as fractals of cold panic surged through him, sickening claws sinking into his heart. "You don't know my truth. You are not my memory." "Is that so?" they hissed, their voices merging into a cacophony of despair. "We are your regrets. There's no escaping us." The stench of decay filled the air as they closed in, grotesque visages of those who had trusted him, faces twisting in anguish and fury. The shadows pressed closer, pressing against him, their coldness invading his skin as they clawed at his mind. Grasping for the spark of light that flickered like a dying ember, he struggled against the weight, against the bitterness threatening to swallow him whole. "You cannot take away my love. You are not real." In that moment of darkness, he felt a glimmer of clarity surge through him, a burning realization. Each memory holds power. I will wield it. He summoned every ounce of strength, drawing from the depths of his heart, feeling the love he carried surge through him, a tremor of light that flickered and danced against the shadows. I remember your laughter," he cried, and as the words spilled forth, the brightness within him flared, swelling like a supernova. "I remember your strength. I cherish every moment we shared. Those memories are mine to hold, forever bright." With a forceful surge, he unleashed a wave of radiant energy, light cascading in rivulets as it punctured the cold darkness, scattering the wretched forms that clawed at his spirit. The shadows screamed again, the sound echoing through the glade, each shriek a mix of rage and fear, a dissonant symphony threatening to drown him in its relentless pitch. Yet he stood tall, pulling deeper from the warmth of love and hope, channeling it into every word. "You cannot overshadow the truth of our bonds. Every laugh, every tear, it is a part of me, but it does not define me. The darkness roiled and twisted. Faces contorted with fury as they met his unwavering gaze, their forms flickering ominously, threatening to collapse into nothingness. "You think this is over?" they spat, their voices dripping with venom. "You cannot escape us. We will find you again." As the last remnants of their forms dissipated into the mists, they felt the cold press of fear melting away, releasing him from its vice-like grip. The light around him pulsed, shimmering with life and defiance, illuminating a way through the shadows that clung stubbornly to the edges of his consciousness. But even as the darkness receded, he knew the battle was not over. Shadows lingered at the periphery, whispering his name in haunting tones, bound and determined to return. Hope flickered softly but remained, a beacon amid the decaying remnants of sorrow. "Face us," they shrieked, their voices fading but ever present. "We will be waiting, hidden beneath your every smile, a constant reminder that you are not free." But he took a deep breath, summoning the last burst of energy from the warmth around him. He could linger, dwell in despair, or choose to walk forward, step after step, into the embrace of the light. "Then let them come. I will not stop fighting." The words swirled through the glade, reverberating like a promise, a spell binding him to this moment of truth. The pull of the shadows languished, their cries softening as the forest breathed anew. Nonetheless, deep down within him, he understood this wound would never fully heal. It was a lingering reminder of love, of joy intertwined with loss, a testament to every laugh shared and every tear shed. In time, he hoped to find peace, but he would never forget. Shadows may return, but he now knew he could confront them, harness the light that resided within, and emerge victorious even against the cruelest darkness. As he stepped cautiously from the remnants of despair, he felt the warmth of sunlight breaking through the branches overhead, bathing him in its glow. Each step he took forward was one toward a future where love would reign supreme, illuminating even the darkest corners of his soul. "Today I choose love," he reaffirmed, fortified by conviction as he walked onward, a warrior of light against the darkness that threatened his existence. In the distance, the forest opened up, revealing a path lined with flowers aglow with shimmering hues, a breathtaking sight that whispered of hope and resilience. The shadows peeled away further, retreating as he ventured closer to the warmth that beckoned in the sunlight. As he walked, his heart brimmed with renewed energy, the chorus of his memories singing loudly in his mind, each note a reminder of the bond he shared with those he loved and lost. Even as the shadows awaited his return, he knew that warmth would carry him through the night, guiding him into brighter tomorrows. He walked on, and with every breath, he embraced the light, where love flowed freely, dispelling the darkness and urging him ever onward into the heart of the world that had once seemed so shrouded in sorrow. The glade transformed before him, a lush tapestry fit for dreams, the colors vibrant and alive, each petal a promise of hope. Yet still, beneath the veneer of serenity, the thread of darkness lingered, curling like smoke, savaging the edges of his newfound joy. "You may have escaped today, but we will not forget," the shadows murmured, teasing from the distance. "We will always be waiting." And as he walked forward, he sensed the truth linger just behind, an ugly reminder of every battle fought, every tear shed, a constant companion in the haunting dance between light and dark. But as long as he held on to love, the light that would always reside within, he knew he could forge ahead, embracing the beautiful mess that was living, forever transformed by shadows but eternally illuminated by hope.